The Jedi Temple, shining fortress of peace, or gilded cage of silence. Imagine being taken as a child, stripped of family, molded into a soldier for a war you never chose, and when the darkness finally came, the galaxy forgot the smallest voices that screamed the loudest. This is the story of the Younglings, and why it truly sucked to be one. If you want to uncover more hidden truths of Star Wars history, make sure to subscribe, because their screams are only the beginning. You don't remember the moment you were chosen, you remember the sound. A distant hum that swelled through the bones of your small house, the kind of sound that says the galaxy is bigger than your name and will not wait for it. You remember your mother's hands, warm and trembling, not from fear of the robed visitor, but from the feeling of you slipping like water through her fingers. You remember a voice in the doorway, calm and certain. The force is strong with this one. The words pressed against you like a brand. You did not choose them, they chose you. You remember the light of the shuttle ramp as it lowered, white and merciless. You remember your father's throat working around a goodbye he could not speak aloud. And then the gate of your childhood closed with a hiss, and the world was suddenly windows and stars and strangers who promised you a destiny. Be brave, someone whispered. It might have been your mother, it might have been you. The ship that carries you to Coruscant is not a warship, not a freighter, not a luxury cruiser. It is a ferry of fates, its compartments filled with children from a dozen worlds. Some still clutch trinkets, carved bone and bead, things the robed ones allowed them to keep for the journey, and only the journey. A few cry in the careful way of children trying not to draw attention. Others stare at the cabin lights as if memorizing them, because the lights are real, and everything else has turned to fog. You sit near the aft viewport and watch space turn into a river. Hyperspace is blue and endless, and yet you feel hemmed in. The attendants move like quiet moons. A pair of service droids and one Padawan barely older than you, his braid peeking from behind his ear. He smiles, but the smile belongs to his training. When he crouches to your level and asks, "First time off-world?" You nod. He looks at your hands. You don't realize you're lenching them until he gently uncurls your fingers and places a wrapped ration bar there like an offering. "Eat," he says. "It helps. You can taste salt. You didn't know you were crying." In the cabin's low murmur, stories pop like sparks. A girl from Kinyon says she can move things if she's angry. A boy from Corellia says he woke from dreams and found the sheets floating. A Togruta child traces invisible currents in the air with her fingertips, her mantrals tipping as if listening to something only she can hear. You add your own story in a whisper you barely own. Once you stopped a cup from falling, but only after it had already shattered, the shards slowing in the air like snow. "See?" the Padawan says, pleased. "The Force already speaks to you." You can tell he means it to comfort you, but your insides tremble. The Force is a whisper you understand and fear, like a tide that doesn't ask before it takes. In sleep, when it comes, you dream of tide pools, of shells you once lined along a windowsill, of your mother's voice singing as if the sound could anchor the ship and reel you back. When you wake, you are in a planet-sized city. Coruscant doesn't rise, it surrounds. The viewport shows you towers like frozen waves, streets layered upon streets, lights upon lights, an ocean of machines blinking in a language of traffic and commerce and armor. The temple appears not as a simple building, but as a mountain polished by millennia, its 5 spires piercing a sun that cannot own this place. The closer you get, the more it looks like a promise and a test. The hangar swallows you and your cohort. The atmosphere changes, colder, cleaner. The sound changes too, a new hum beneath everything, like the vibration of a galaxy measured and managed. You file down the ramp with the others, and your shoes echo on the deck. The air smells like metal and stone and something faintly sweet. Ness, you will learn later, burnt for the memory of the first masters. A figure waits at the base of the ramp. A knight in brown and cream, her belt heavy with a hilt that glints like a captured comet. Her eyes take in all of you at once, and in that look you feel weighed, not unkindly but precisely. "Welcome," she says, and her voice finds your fear as if it has been trained to do so. "You are safe here. You are home." Home, The word lands in you like a pebble in deep water, ripples spreading, meeting others already spreading, making patterns you cannot predict. You look over your shoulder, expecting to see your mother's face in the crowd of workers, your father standing with set shoulders. There is only the ramp, retracting, the ship preparing for another voyage, another collection of children. In procession, you pass into the body of the temple. The floor becomes stone veined with white, worn silky by thousands of feet. Columns rise like trees petrified mid-reach. The ceiling is a sky painted with coated starlight, a trove of constellations that once meant navigation and now mean tradition. You cross courtyards where wind sings between cloisters, and statues keep watch with calm stone eyes. Everywhere is the sense of balance, weighed steps, measured voices, purposeful silence. The pacification of chaos looks like this, you think. It looks like symmetry. You are divided into clutches, initiate clans, they tell you, and assigned a sleeping hall. Your bed is a shallow curve in an arc of identical shallow curves, each with a folded blanket, a woven mat, a small cabinet for personal items, though you have none but the ration bar wrapper still in your pocket. Other children shuffle, stand, sit, stare. One begins to cry, then stops, cheeks burning as if emotion were a mistake. A caretaker droid glides among you with a tray of cups, each steaming with something like tea but not tea. When you sip, the flavor is grass and sun, and you wonder if brew comfort from the air itself. A master visits. He is small and ancient and teems with gravity. He speaks about calm and discipline and the path you begin today, about the force that binds and surrounds, penetrates, illuminates. He says the words as if each syllable has taken 1,000 years to polish. You listen, because his voice is a river, and rivers know where to go. Attachment leads to jealousy. Jealousy leads to suffering, he says. Let go of what you fear to lose. Your hand is inside your pocket, the ration wrapper crinkling beneath your thumb, your last proof of the shuttle and of the boy who told you to eat. You cannot let go. Not yet. The master's eyes, wise and mossy, fall on your hand as if he hears the sound of the plastic paper too. He nods, almost imperceptibly, not to scold, but to say, I know the way of this tide, little one. That night, the hall is full of the small sounds of children trying to be brave, stifled sniffles, the rustle of bedding, breaths caught and released. In the in-between of waking and sleeping, you hear the temple's true voice for the first time. It does not belong to the masters. It belongs to the stone. It says, you are a drop in an ocean that will shape you. It says, the ocean does not know your name. Training aboard a world of stone and light begins like a hymn. Mornings start with silence. You sit cross-legged, a circle within circles, a soft field of faces and smooth scalps. A night moves around you like a clock hand, correcting postures with fingertips. Your back protests, your knees ache. Notice the ache, the night says, not unkindly. It is your first teacher. The force itself is introduced as if it were a patient animal. Do not chase it, a voice instructs. Invite it. Breathe with it. Wait. Waiting is harder than lifting. Harder than the wooden practice sabers that thwack your forearms. Harder than the lessons where the galaxy's history unfurls like star maps. Great wars and quiet treaties, the rise and fall of empires you cannot imagine. Waiting is where your old life creeps in. In the breath spaces, the smell of your mother's cooking returns. The pattern of your father's boots at the door repeats on the stone floor. In the smooth, blank moments of meditation, your mind is a restless room you are not allowed to leave. Sometimes you feel the force with the clean clarity of a bell, a bead of water hovering above your palm, a training remote turning obediently in midair. Sometimes it is like trying to catch a reflection in a river at dusk. You know it is there, but when you reach, the image shatters. On those days you measure yourself against the others. The Togruta girl levitates a stack of stones taller than her. She smiles with her whole face. The boy from Corellia blinks, and a row of candles gutter simultaneously, his wonder spilling over into laughter. You wonder if the ocean loves them more. The masters speak of emotion like weather, something that arrives and passes, but through which you must still walk, dry at the center. The code becomes a set of steps they ask you to learn. No emotion, there is peace. No ignorance, there is knowledge. The words are a staircase you climb over and over, up into the predictable air at the top, only to find you are still yourself. You try on peace like a robe too big at the shoulders. You tell yourself knowledge is a door to a room where you will not miss your mother's voice. In the practice halls, you learn to move. Your body, once a bundle of childhood habits, becomes a set of angles and arcs. Older Padawans teach you the names of the forms as if reciting family lineage. Shicho, Makashi, Sorasu, the syllables taste. E like coins, cool and proud. You mimic stances, breath, the small pivot that turns a strike into a circle. You discover the joy of motion until it becomes thoughtless, the simple miracle of your foot finding the ground exactly where it ought to be. A master takes a group of you to a long room lined with windows. The city roars outside like surf. He lays small spheres on a mat, training orbs that float, glow, hum. Trust, he says, and you hear the capital T. Trust is not a feeling, it is a decision. He bids you close your eyes. You do, darkness blooming behind your lids. The orbs buzz, you sense them like insects at the edge of your patience. Do not swat, the master advises. Notice, invite, decide. An orb nudges toward your cheek. You feel it not as a shape but as an intent, and you exhale to keep from flinching. You tilt, extend your palm. The hum falters, the orb pauses, fidgets in the air, then drifts into your hand like a tame thing. You open your eyes to its pale light cupped in your fingers and laugh, a little explosive bark. The master's mouth curves. Good, he says, then to the room. Let that sound teach you too. You carry the lesson in your chest until night. In the sleeping hall, the laugh returns uninvited, then sinks under a weight you do not recognize. The word home rides the hush of other children settling. You think of the night's greeting, you are home, and something in you recoils. Your cabinet holds nothing but a folded tunic and the ration wrapper. You slide the wrapper out and hold it to your ear as if it might carry the echo of a voice. Eat, it helps. A small voice comes from the bed to your left. Do you think they'll let us visit? It belongs to a boy with pale eyes who speaks as if his words could dissolve into the air before anyone hears. Visit where? You ask, though you already know. Home. You are quiet. Silence lengthens between you like a hallway. This is home, you say at last, the training answering even before you can choose it. Oh, he says, and the sound cuts. Then I'm homesick for the wrong place. You stare at the ceiling, at the faint constellations etched there to comfort young eyes. The patterns are older than the ache. You try to name them as the masters taught you. You get lost and fall asleep anyway. Days string into a braid. Meditation, movement, lessons, meals eaten from bowls that smell of broth and something leaf green. You learn the temple's geography as if it were the inside of your own hand, the council's tower you rarely see beyond its distant glow, the archives where librarians move like ghosts and datapads whisper facts, the training yards open to a sky always busy with speeders, their contrails like writing you cannot read. You learn which fountains make the best thinking noise. You learn which stairwells are safe places to cry, if you must, if you cannot hold the weather inside. Now and then, a knight or master stands in the doorway of your training hall, watching. Their eyes do not judge, they measure. You begin to understand that this is a place of selection, and selection is a cousin of loss. The older ones speak of the day they were chosen, a simple moment when a hand fell on a shoulder and everything changed. You imagine the weight of that hand and long for it in ways you cannot confess. Want is a sharp thing here. You try not to bleed. In your 4th week, a ceremony is held for the new arrivals. You stand in a circle under a ceiling of carved stars, palm to palm, a ring of small bones and big futures. A master sings in a language you don't know and don't need to know. You feel the sound more than hear it, a resonance in the chest that feels like standing on a bridge over a deep chasm and dropping a stone to see how low. Long before the sound return, one by one, you are asked to release something you brought with you. The girl from Kinyan places her carved bead on a tray. The boy from Corellia lays down a metal bolt he claimed was lucky. The Togruta child presses her fingertips to her mantrals, breathes, and places nothing. The gesture alone enough. When it is your turn, you take out the wrapper. Its crinkle seems suddenly too loud. You open your mouth to explain, to say it is not a trinket, but a lifeline, not an object, but a sound. But the words make a knot and refuse to go. The master holds out the tray. His face is calm, kind, patient. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting, he murmurs, as if he's standing inside your head. It means you don't have to carry it to know it is yours. You place the wrapper on the tray. It weighs nothing and everything. The tray moves on. The ceremony ends with hands lifted and then lowered, a tide's imitation. You feel light and hollow. That night your dreams are different. The tide pool returns, but the water is black glass. You look down and see, reflected, not your face but a sky full of red cuts, lines that look like the contrails from the training yard except they fall, and they do not stop falling. A far-off thunder shakes the glass. You wake with the taste of sparks at the back of your tongue. You tell no one. Weeks become months. The ache fades and returns, becomes a rhythm. You mark your growth in centimeters, in the looseness of your first tunic, in the way your hands find a training saber's balance without thinking. You mark it in other ways too. You can sit in silence longer. You can let the force come to you more often than you chase it. You have learned the difference between hunger and yearning and how the code treats them. You have learned the difference between obedience and trust. One afternoon, your instructor leads you to the archives, a place you have tiptoed through before but never entered with purpose. You stand under shelves that arc like the ribs of a great beast, the light cool and pale. The librarian, a woman whose eyes look like they could read a person as easily as a text, smiles when she sees your clan. Today, she says, you will choose a story, and the story will choose a question. Bring me the question. Your hands drift past scrolls and cubes, past recorded voices and maps. You choose a fragment of a hollow record, old and a little broken, that shows a planet you do not recognize, its cities like teeth, its deserts like old scars. The record's voice is full of ash. It speaks of a war far older than your life, of Jedi and not Jedi, of the Force twisted and the Force healed. It speaks of victory and cost. It speaks like someone asking forgiveness. What is your question? The librarian asks when you return. You want to ask why the winning never feels like anything but losing something else. You want to ask what it costs to be peace in a place like this. You want to ask if the ocean knows the names of the drops at all. Instead you say, why must we not love? The librarian looks at you as if you have told her your true name. The pause that follows is not silence. It's a bell you can feel but not hear. Ah, she says softly, who told you that you must not? The code, you say, a little too quickly. Attachment is forbidden. Attachment is a kind of love that is afraid, she answers. Do you know the kind I mean? You think of your hand around the wrapper in the dark. You think of the way your chest tightens when a master's glance passes over you and moves on. You think of the boy with the pale eyes saying he is homesick for the wrong place. You nod. Then ask yourself instead, what kind of love is brave? The librarian says, and cease. Ends you away with a warmth in your belly that feels like a small sun, newly lit. You carry the question with you into the hall, into your next drills, into the quiet of your bed. It makes a different kind of ache, the good kind, you think, the kind that stretches a space for something to grow. On the way back from training, you pause in a corridor open to a view of the city. The sky is bruised with evening, traffic streams like veins of light. You lean on the railing and let the wind grab your hair, the taste of metal and rain on your tongue. A pair of clones, a rare sight here, all white armor and angled lines, march along a lower terrace, helmets turning in unison as if listening to orders only they can hear. They look like the training orbs, you think suddenly, except their hum has teeth. A shadow moves along the far spire. You catch it without the eyes. A cold current, the feeling of a storm deciding where to break. You look up. A flock of sky moths skitters across the distance, disturbed by something you cannot name. The city, for a heartbeat, seems to hold its breath. Do you feel that? Someone asks behind you. It's the Togruta girl, hands on the rail, montrals tilted. Her voice has lost the easy glow it had when she levitated stones. Yes, you say, and the word lands like a pebble in deep water, ripples meeting others. You don't know what it is you feel, only that somewhere beyond the careful geometry of the temple, beyond the measured lessons and kind rebukes, something is moving, patient and certain as a tide. It will not ask. It will take. You turn from the view and walk back into the temple's throat of stone. The hall swallows your small footfalls. In the training room, the lights are already dim to evening, and your clan is gathering in a loose ring. Some laughing, some unusually quiet. Your bed waits like a question. Your cabinet holds your tunic and nothing else. You breathe the familiar air, touch the stone that has been smoothed by 1,000 hands before yours, and tell yourself you are safe. Outside, somewhere you cannot see, thunder is rehearsing its lines. You remember the way the temple looked when the ship first banked low through the atmosphere, the way Coruscant's endless cityscape swallowed the horizon. To a child's eyes it was impossible to measure, impossible to imagine that somewhere down there, hidden beneath layers of durasteel and traffic lanes, people lived their ordinary lives, families together, voices rising and falling in the hum of dinners and lullabies. All you could see were towers stacked upon towers, a galaxy crammed into a single planet, a million lights burning in the veins of a world that never slept. Yet in the middle of that chaos, the temple rose. It was not made of transparent steel or gleaming alloys like the spires surrounding it, but of ancient stone, weathered by centuries and polished by reverence. Its 5 towers pierced the air like raised fingers pointing toward stars that you could no longer see. It looked less like a home and more like something that had grown out of the planet itself, a monument the world had built to worship something beyond it. To you, it was not just a building, it was a giant that breathed and watched. Walking into it for the first time was like stepping into a myth. The outer halls swallowed you and the other children, your tiny footsteps echoing in chambers so vast you could have stacked entire starships within them. The air was different here. Cooler, sharper, tinged with incense that clung to the senses, as if the stones themselves had absorbed the prayers of 1,000 generations and now exhaled them back into you. The walls were carved with reliefs, sweeping murals of Jedi who had come before, robed figures frozen in triumph or meditation. Their eyes seemed to follow you as you passed, and you wondered if they judged you, if they were measuring your worth before you even began your training. Masters and knights glided past, their robes whispering across the polished floors. They carried themselves with the gravity of planets, and yet not one looked directly at you. They were part of the temple, as inseparable from it as its columns and vaulted ceilings. Their presence made you feel both protected and dismissed, as if you were safe but insignificant. The Padawan guiding your group explained in hushed tones what each chamber was, but his voice blurred under the weight of the silence. The temple's true voice was not spoken. It was the resonance of stone, the patient heartbeat of something built not just to house people, but to contain faith itself. Your clan was led through corridors that curved like rivers, through courtyards where fountains danced and gardens bloomed under filtered light. Every path seemed intentional, every step a ritual. You could not tell if you were walking deeper into the heart of something alive or further into the belly of a beast. At last, you reached the great central hall, where the ceiling arched so high it might have been a sky. Sunlight poured through slits in the stone, falling in golden beams that seemed solid enough to touch. The sound of your footsteps joined those of countless others. Younglings and Padawans and Jedi, all moving in patterns that reminded you of currents in the Force. You were part of it now, swept along in its stream. When you looked up at the towering statues of ancient Jedi, you felt your chest tighten. Their faces were stern, carved from the same stone as the temple itself. They had been children once too, you realized, plucked from homes and remade by these walls. Now they were immortalized not for who they were, but for what they became. The thought made your skin prickle. Would you become a statue one day? Would your name vanish into legend, your face sanded smooth into something unrecognizable, leaving no memory of the child who once missed his mother's voice? Nights inside the temple were stranger still. From your sleeping hall you could feel the giant's breath, the way the building seemed to sigh as if it were shifting in its dreams. The stone floors were cold under your bare feet, and every sound traveled as though the temple wanted to remind you that nothing here was truly private. Whispers bounced like ghosts, and you learned quickly that even silence had a presence. When the caretakers doused the lights and left only the faint glow of hovering orbs, you stared at the high ceilings and wondered if the stars still existed beyond this city of endless towers, or if the temple had stolen them too. You began to learn the rhythm of the days, the gongs that rang at dawn to summon you to meditation, the shuffle of robes across the flagstones as masters gathered their clans, the hum of training remotes and the crack of wooden sabers in the sparring yards. The temple demanded discipline, and its architecture reflected it, every hall symmetrical, every doorway aligned, every courtyard balanced like a scale. You felt the weight of that symmetry pressing into your bones, telling you what you must become. Yet sometimes, when you passed near the open terraces, you saw the chaos of the city below, the ceaseless river of speeders, the clamor of millions of beings, the disorder of life, and part of you longed to be in it rather than above it. There were moments when the temple tried to comfort you. The archives were vast and cool, filled with light that shifted like water, shelves upon shelves of holocrons and data cards that whispered with knowledge. You would trail your fingers along the bindings of old scrolls and feel history hum under your skin. The gardens, too, offered a kind of refuge. Exotic plants from across the galaxy bloomed in geometric patterns, their scents mingling into something strange but soothing. In the evenings, acres would allow you to sit among them, and you could almost pretend you were outside, on some world where wind and sun were natural instead of engineered. Almost. But the temple was a cage even when it gave you beauty. The walls reminded you that freedom was something you had traded the moment you stepped off the shuttle. It wasn't only the building that loomed over you, it was the eyes of the council. Though you rarely saw them directly, their presence was everywhere. Stories of Yoda, Mace Windu, Shakti, and Ki-Adi-Mundi drifted through the halls like rumors of gods. When they passed, entire corridors fell silent, and you could feel the air tighten as though even the temple itself held its breath in deference. You wondered if they remembered what it was like to be you, small and unsure, clutching the ghost of a home that no longer belonged to you, or had they given all of that to the stone giant long ago, trading it for wisdom that came at the cost of everything else. There were nights when you tried to pray to the temple itself, though you didn't know the words. You pressed your hand against the cold stone of your bed's alcove and whispered the names of your parents, hoping the walls would carry them somewhere. Maybe the Force could find them. Maybe they could feel you. But the stone gave nothing back, except the faint vibration of the city outside, reminding you that you were lost in a place too vast to ever hear one child's voice. The days grew heavier with expectation. You were told again and again that the temple was not just a home, but a forge. Children entered as raw ore, and through discipline, training, and sacrifice, the temple hammered them into Jedi. Every bruise you carried from sparring, every ache in your knees from endless meditation was a strike of the hammer shaping you. But what if the ore shattered? What if you weren't strong enough? You saw it in the others, some who struggled to keep up, who cried when they thought no one was watching, who clung too tightly to the past. You wondered if the temple had a place for them at all, or if it would simply grind them into dust and scatter them into the streets below, forgotten. And yet, there were moments of awe. When you stood in the great hall at sunset and the light slanted through the windows, painting the stone in fire. When you listened to the distant hum of lightsabers in the training rooms, imagining the day you would hold one yourself. When you saw the Padawans walking beside their masters, their braids swaying like banners of belonging, and you dreamed that one day a hand would rest on your shoulder too. The temple was cruel, but it dangled hope like a flame in the darkness. That hope kept you moving forward step by step into the heart of the giant. But sometimes, when you pressed your ear against the cold stone walls at night, you thought you heard another sound. Not the breath of the temple, not the murmur of children, not the distant hum of the city. Something else. A faint echo, like the rumble of thunder gathering far away. You told yourself it was only your imagination. You told yourself the temple was eternal, unshakable, a fortress that would never fall. Yet still the sound lingered, carried through the stone like a warning. And one night, as you drifted toward sleep in the vast silence of the hall, the sound returned, louder this time. Not thunder, not a storm, but the march of soldiers in your dream, armored boots pounding on the temple steps. You woke with your heart racing, the taste of fear in your mouth, and for the first time since you arrived, you realized the stone giant might not protect you forever. Something darker was coming, and the temple's walls would not be enough to hold it back. You wake before the gongs. The temple sleeps, but your eyes do not. Around you, the hall is filled with the small breathing of children curled into shallow beds, their faces turned toward dreams that sometimes betray them. You lie still, staring at the ceiling where faint starlight glows in etched patterns. The constellations look like freedom, like the sky you once knew. But here they are, fixed in stone, never shifting, never moving with the seasons. The longer you stare at them, the more you understand. The temple wants to teach you that the sky does not belong to you anymore. Nothing does. When the gongs sound, soft but commanding, you rise with the rest of your clan. The robes you wear are identical to theirs, plain, cream, unadorned. There is no sign of the child you were before, no color or trinket or scar of identity. You are being stripped down, polished smooth, turned into something the Order can shape. It is not cruelty, though it feels like it. It is discipline. It is preparation. That is what they tell you. But inside, you know what it is. Erasure. The morning meditation is always the same. You kneel in a circle, cross-legged, spines straight, eyes closed. Masters pace quietly among you, their presence heavy but calm, their voices low and steady. Empty yourselves, they say. Let go of desire. Let go of fear. Let go of attachment. The words settle into you like drops of water over stone. You try to obey. You imagine your parents' faces fading into mist. You imagine your home dissolving into nothing, but they do not fade. They cling like shadows, sharper when you try to chase them away. A boy next to you sniffles. His shoulders tremble. His breath stutters. A master kneels beside him and places a hand gently on his back. Do not cling, the master says. Feel, then release. The boy, no. DS. But you can hear the sound of his grief trying to escape anyway. You feel it too, a knot under your ribs, and for a moment the room feels heavy with ghosts. Later, in the training yard, you take wooden sabers in hand. The drills are endless. Strike, parry, step, breathe. The instructors demand focus, precision, uniformity. When you falter, when your strike hesitates, you are told it is because you are distracted, because you are still clinging. A Jedi must be empty, the knight says, his voice as sharp as the crack of your saber meeting wood. If you fight for yourself, you lose. If you fight for another, you fall. You fight only for the Force. The words circle in your head like carrion birds. You fight only for the Force. But what does the Force fight for? The question blooms in your chest, dangerous and unspeakable. You swallow it like poison. Meals are taken in silence, bowls of broth and grains that taste of nothing. The children around you eat quickly, mechanically, as if food is fuel and nothing more. You try to pretend the blandness satisfies you, but your tongue remembers flavors from home. Spiced roots roasted in fire, sweet fruit bursting with juice, the taste of your mother's cooking seasoned with love. Here, food is only function. Here love has no place. At night the masters walk among you, their voices repeating the code. No emotion, there is peace. No ignorance, there is knowledge. No passion, there is serenity. No chaos, there is harmony. No death, there is the Force. The cadence is like a lullaby, but instead of soothing you, it chisels at you. Each line is a stone laid on your chest. You repeat the words in whispers with the others, and in repeating them, you feel pieces of yourself slipping away. There are times you want to reach for the other children, to hold their hands in the dark, to remind them that you are not alone, but every attempt at closeness feels forbidden. The temple teaches that bonds are dangerous, that friendship becomes weakness, that love leads to fear and fear leads to anger and anger leads to suffering. So you withdraw, even when every part of you screams for connection. You watch the other younglings do the same. You see the way a girl looks at her bunkmate with affection, then forces her eyes away. You see the way two boys laugh together, only to stop when a master enters the hall, their smiles vanishing into blank obedience. The temple builds walls not just of stone but of silence. Sometimes, though, you cannot help yourself. Once, after training, you and the pale-eyed boy from your clan sit together on the edge of a fountain in one of the inner courtyards. He speaks of his home, a cold world of glaciers and wind. His voice is low, cautious, but full of longing. You listen, and in his words, you see your own longing reflected. For a moment it feels like you have broken the code together, sharing what you should have forgotten. But then he falls quiet, his eyes downcast, and says, "We shouldn't talk about it. They'll say we're clinging." The silence that follows feels like betrayal. You want to shout that it is not wrong to remember, that it is not weakness to care. But you say nothing because you fear the masters are always listening. The stone walls have ears. As weeks turn into months, you begin to notice how the temple sorts you. Some children shine quickly, fast learners, steady meditators, gifted duelists. They are praised quietly, acknowledged with nods from the instructors. Others struggle, and though no one says it, you see the way masters' eyes pass over them. Dismissive. A child who cannot let go is a burden. A child who can not detach is a liability. You wonder which you are. One evening you overhear two knights speaking in a corridor. Their voices echo against the stone. "This one is promising," one says. "That one struggles too much. If they cannot release their ties, they cannot be trusted." You freeze where you stand, heart hammering. The words feel like a sentence. You understand then. If you cannot sever the last threads of who you were, you will not survive here. The temple will not throw you into the streets, not directly, but it will make sure you are left behind, forgotten. The next morning, you sit longer in meditation. You try harder to empty yourself. You repeat the code until it feels carved into your bones. You pretend your memories are gone. You try to believe it. But sometimes, in the stillness, the Force itself seems to betray the teachings. It does not feel cold or empty. It feels alive, vibrant, full of voices. When you reach into it, you sense warmth, connection, the threads that bind everything together. It feels like love, not detachment. And you wonder, quietly, dangerously, if the masters have misunderstood, or worse, if they are lying. There is a night when you dream again of home. You see your parents' faces, blurred by distance but shining with love. You wake with tears on your cheeks, and the boy in the bunk beside you turns over and whispers, "Did you dream too?" His eyes glimmer in the dim light. You nod, unable to speak. For a heartbeat, you both understand each other completely, bound by the one thing you are not allowed to share. Then footsteps echo in the corridor, and the moment shatters. Discipline tightens like a noose. The temple continues to shape you, hammering you into silence, pressing you into obedience. The stone giant does not weep for what it takes from you. It only watches, patient and unyielding, as your heart is trained to forget how to ache. Yet in the quiet of your chest, something resists. A small ember, stubborn and secret, refuses to die. It whispers to you when the masters speak of detachment. It whispers when you watch a friend's smile fade under the weight of the code. It whispers when you look out over the city and see families living and loving below. The ember tells you that love is not weakness, that maybe, one day, the stone will crack. And as you close your eyes at night, repeating the words you are forced to memorize, you feel that ember glow hotter. The temple has taught you to let go of everything. But you know deep down that there are some things you will never release. The code promises peace, but in your dreams you hear thunder again. The same march of boots you thought you imagined before. The same storm creeping closer. You realize with a shiver that the temple's greatest lesson, detachment, may not protect you at all when that storm finally breaks. The mornings grow sharper. The air of the temple no longer feels foreign against your skin. It has become the rhythm of your breathing, the pulse beneath your ribs, and yet you never forget what it demands of you. Every sunrise comes with another test, another small stripping away of who you once were. The masters call them exercises, lessons, paths to discipline, but to you they are trials. Each one measures your worth. Each one whispers that you are replaceable if you falter. The stone giant watches, patient, waiting to see if you will break or bend. The training yards become your battleground. You step onto the polished floors with wooden sabers in hand, your feet bare against the cold stone, your body trembling with the weight of expectation. Around you, other children form circles, pairs and lines. The air hums with anticipation. The masters stand at the edges like shadows, their robes unmoving, their eyes sharp and unblinking. Begin, one commands, and the sound is like thunder. The clash of wood on wood fills the air. You lunge, block, parry, strike again, your body moving because it must, because hesitation is punished. Each hit stings against your arms, bruises blooming where defenses fail. Pain is not acknowledged here. It is expected. You grit your teeth and hold your ground. A girl opposite you sweeps your feet with a perfect strike, and you crash onto the floor. Before you can rise, the master's voice cuts across the yard. You are not focused. Your mind is elsewhere. Attachment clouds you. Let it go. You scramble back to your feet, shame burning hotter than the bruise. Hours stretch like years in these yards. Sweat drips down your neck, pools in the corners of your tunic, mixes with dust. Wooden sabers slam against each other again and again, the rhythm becoming a chant of endurance. You begin to understand that the fights are not about winning. They are about breaking you open, testing how far you will go before your spirit cracks. Some children collapse, their bodies unable to keep up. Others push themselves beyond exhaustion, their eyes glazed but their movements precise. You wonder which one you will become. Beyond the dueling, there are other trials. In the meditation chambers, you are told to still your mind while training remotes buzz around you, firing low stings of energy at your skin. You are blindfolded, forced to trust only the Force. The first sting sears your arm, the second your leg. Breathe, the knight says calmly. Do not anticipate, do not fear, feel. The third shot comes, and this time you move, your saber rising to deflect it. The hum of the blade sings in your ears, though it is only wood. For a moment, you feel it. You feel the current of the Force flowing through you, guiding your hands. The triumph is fleeting. The next sting catches your shoulder, and you flinch, the illusion broken. The Master's sigh is soft but heavy, still too much fear. The archives hold their own kind of trials. You are brought into the vast library, its towers of knowledge stretching into infinity, its silence deeper than any training yard. Here, the test is patience. You are told to seek answers, to learn the histories of the galaxy, to bury ignorance under the weight of wisdom. But the stories you uncover are heavy. They speak of wars, of Jedi lost, of choices that tore empires apart. You read about children just like you, who once knelt in these same halls and swore the same code, only to vanish into battles they never chose. The words carve into your mind, reminders that you are being prepared not for peace, but for sacrifice. Knowledge here is not comfort. It is a mirror of your own future. Even the gardens become a place of testing. What looks like serenity is only another lesson disguised in green. You are told to balance stones with your mind, to make water dance between your hands, to sense the small heartbeat of every living thing around you. At first it feels wondrous, the hum of life resonating like music, but then you realize the challenge is not sensing it, but resisting the urge to cling to it. You want to cradle the flower that bends toward your breath, to hold the insect that lands on your hand. Instead, the Master's voice cuts through the moment. Release. Nothing belongs to you, even this. You let the insect fly, your hand closing around emptiness. The trials are not only of body and mind, but of spirit. At night, in the silence of the dormitories, you feel the weight of the day pressing down. Children whisper of their failures, their bruises, their shame. Some cry softly into their pillows, their sobs muffled by discipline. Others turn inward, their faces stone masks, even in sleep. You learn that loneliness is another trial, perhaps the hardest of all. To be surrounded by so many and yet forbidden from holding on to them, that is a test the Masters never name, but one that never ends. There are moments of rebellion. Small, secret, but real. You and the pale-eyed boy once sneak into a quiet corridor and share fragments of memory. He tells you of the glaciers of his world, the way the wind howled like a beast across the ice. You tell him of the warmth of your mother's fire, the smell of spices in the air. For a few breaths, you feel whole again, tethered to something beyond the temple. But when footsteps echo nearby, fear floods both of you, and the memories turn to silence. Even rebellion is swallowed by the stone. The Masters insist the trials are for your growth. The Force will guide you, they say. Discipline will shape you. Release wit will free you. But beneath their words, you begin to sense something else. Not cruelty, not malice, but indifference. The temple is a forge, and you are metal. The forge does not care which piece bends, which breaks, which is discarded. It only cares that the fire burns. One evening you stand in the great hall as the sun sets through narrow slits in the stone. The light paints the statues in fire, casting shadows that stretch across the floor. The Masters walk among the children, offering quiet words, adjusting stances, correcting breaths. You watch them, and you wonder if they remember the pain of these trials. You wonder if they, too, once lay awake at night, clutching the ghosts of their families, aching for touch, aching for belonging. Or did the temple strip it all from them until only the code remained? The trials continue, day after day, grinding you into something harder, sharper, emptier. But there are cracks. Sometimes when you strike with your saber and feel the Force guiding you, there is joy in the motion, a spark of freedom. Sometimes when you sit in silence, you feel not emptiness but a vast connection, a warmth that contradicts everything the code demands. Sometimes when you laugh with another youngling before you remember you're not supposed to, you feel alive. These are not victories the Masters acknowledge, but they are yours. Still, the temple waits for weakness. You know it in your bones. One mistake, one failure too great, and you will be cast aside. You have seen it happen. A girl in your clan who could not silence her grief was quietly taken away. No one tells you where she went. Her bed remains empty, her name unspoken. The silence around her absence is heavier than words. You understand now. To fail the trials is to vanish, so you push harder. You endure the bruises, the stings, the silence. You repeat the code until it feels like your own voice. You force yourself to release, even when every part of you clings. You survive, because survival is the only triumph the temple allows. But as you lie awake in the darkness, staring at the constellations carved into the ceiling, the ember in your chest burns. It whispers that there is more to the Force than silence, more to life than release. The temple can demand, can shape, can strip, but it cannot extinguish that ember. You cling to it, secretly, fiercely, even as you pretend to let go of everything else. And still, in the quiet, you hear it again, the echo that haunts your dreams. The march of soldiers, the storm gathering just beyond the horizon. The trials prepare you for discipline, for obedience, for letting go, but will they prepare you for the darkness that is coming? The question lingers in the stone, unanswered. The nights in the temple are supposed to be still. The caretakers dim the lights until only faint orbs hover in the high corners, the chambers hushed except for the quiet rustle of bodies settling into rest. From the outside, the temple at night looks serene, a monument of peace, its spires glowing softly against the eternal city of Coruscant. But inside, in the sleeping halls where children curl into their shallow alcoves, the stillness is a lie. For in the silence of the night, the dreams come, and they do not let you rest. At first, the dreams are soft, like fragments of memory stitched together from the pieces of the life you left behind. You see your mother's face, her eyes bright with warmth. You feel your father's hand on your shoulder, heavy with pride and fear. You hear the laughter of neighbors, the songs of your world carried by wind. These visions fill you with longing so sharp, it cuts through your chest. When you wake, your throat aches from a cry you never dared to release. The temple tells you to let go, but the dreams drag you back, refusing to let you forget. Then the dreams change. They grow stranger, darker, more insistent. You dream of running through corridors not of stone, but of fire. You dream of shadows that move like living things, stretching long fingers across the walls of your sleeping hall. You dream of blue blades humming in the dark, of soldiers in white armor marching with faceless precision. You dream of Anakin Skywalker, though you have never met him, his name whispered in awe by older younglings, the hero of the Clone Wars. In your dreams, his face is a mask of light and shadow, his eyes burning like suns. He reaches out his hand, and when you take it, the warmth turns to ash. Other children dream too. You hear it in the night, in the restless turning, the muffled whimpers, the cries swallowed by the stone. Sometimes a boy wakes screaming, his voice shattering the silence. A master comes quickly, kneeling beside him, murmuring words of calm. The boy's tears are wiped away, his trembling soothed, but the master's face remains unreadable. When the boy lies down again, his dream unspoken, the master whispers only one command: release. And so the boy lies still, staring at the ceiling, his eyes wide, as if to sleep again would be to surrender. The temple speaks often of visions, of the way the Force flows through dream. The masters say some are glimpses of the past, others fragments of the future, and still others are mere illusions of fear. But they never tell you how to know the difference. And so you lie awake at night, wondering which of your dreams are memory, which are prophecy, and which are simply your heart breaking against the code you are forced to live by. One night, you dream of your home again. You stand at the threshold, the doorway glowing with firelight. You see your mother bending over the hearth, her back turned to you. You hear your father outside calling your name. The smell of spice fills the air. For a moment it feels real, so real that you reach out to touch her shoulder. But when she turns, her face is not hers. It is stone, lifeless, cracked, like one of the temple statues. Her eyes are hollow. She opens her mouth to speak, but no sound comes, only dust. You jolt awake, gasping, your heart pounding. Across the hall, you see the pale-eyed boy sitting upright in his bed, watching you silently. In the dim light, his face looks just as haunted as yours. "Another dream?" he whispers. You nod, unable to find words. "I had one too," he says, his voice trembling. "I saw the temple burning. I saw," his breath catches, "I saw us dying." The silence that follows is heavier than stone. Neither of you can say what you are both thinking. What if the dreams are not lies? What if they are warnings? The days after such nights are harder. Your body is tired, your limbs heavy, your strikes slower in the training yard. The masters notice. They always notice. "You are distracted," one says, her voice sharp. "Your mind clings to illusions. Dreams are not real. Only the present matters." She makes you kneel in the corner of the yard, eyes closed, until the others have finished sparring. The punishment is not meant to hurt, but to shame. You feel the stares of the other children, some pitying, some wary, as if your failure might infect them. You keep your eyes shut, but behind your lids, the dreams replay anyway. Sometimes you try to confide in the others, to whisper in the safety of the dark, but the fear of being heard by a master silences most of them. The code is a wall even between you and your closest companions. Still, fragments slip through. A girl confesses she dreamed of her brother back home, only to see him vanish into smoke. Another admits she sees rivers of blood when she closes her eyes, though she doesn't know why. Each dream is different, yet the feeling is the same: loss, destruction, endings. The temple calls itself a place of peace, but the Force whispers of violence to come. As weeks pass, the dreams grow bolder. They bleed into waking life. During meditation, when you are supposed to empty yourself, you see flashes, your homeworld swallowed by fire, the halls of the temple filled with blaster fire, the faces of your friends twisted in fear. You jerk from the vision, and the master scolds you for your lack of discipline. But how can you explain that the Force itself is showing you something you cannot unsee? How can you say that every time you close your eyes, the future looks darker than the past? One afternoon, in the archives, you stumble across a holocron. It flickers when you touch it, the voice of a long-dead Jedi whispering about visions. The future is always in motion, the voice says. Dreams are streams that may join the river or vanish into the sand. Beware of fear, for it will make you mistake shadows for destiny. The words are meant to comfort, but they don't. They feel like a warning wrapped in riddles. You want to scream at the holocron, to demand answers. Instead, you close it and return it to the shelf, your hands trembling. That night, you dream again. This time, you are in the training yard, but it is empty, silent. Your wooden saber lies broken at your feet. You look up, and the sky above Coruscant is red, streaked with fire. The temple's spires crack and crumble. You hear the march of boots, the hiss of blasters, the hum of sabers igniting, and then you see him again. Anakin Skywalker, his cloak whipping in the storm, his eyes burning. He raises his blade and the light blinds you. You wake with a cry, your body drenched in sweat. Around you, other children stir, some murmuring, some turning away. The pale-eyed boy sits up again, his face pale in the glow of the orbs. He doesn't need to ask this time. He knows. The next morning you move through the temple like a ghost. Every sound feels distant, every command hollow. The code says dreams mean nothing, that attachment to them is weakness. But how do you release something that feels more real than the waking world? How do you let go of a vision that clings to your bones? The masters do not speak of the war, not directly. They say the temple is a sanctuary, that you are safe here. But when clone troopers march through the halls on official business, their armor gleaming white, you feel the echo of your dreams in the rhythm of their boots. You watch them from the shadows, your heart thundering, and you wonder if one day those same boots will march not beside you, but against you. And then comes the dream that breaks you. You are in the sleeping hall, lying in your bed, just as you are now. You hear the doors open. You hear footsteps, heavy, purposeful. You see blue light flare in the dark. Children scream. Sabers hum. You watch as one by one your friends fall. The pale-eyed boy reaches for you, his face twisted in terror, but before you can move, a blade cuts him down. You turn, trying to run, but the shadows close in and there is nowhere left to go. You wake choking on a sob, the taste of smoke still in your mouth. This time, you cannot hold it in. Tears spill hot down your cheeks. You bury your face in your pillow, but the sound escapes anyway. Across the hall, you see others stirring, their eyes wide, their faces pale. They know. They dream too. The temple says to release. But how can you release what the Force itself sears into your mind? How can you let go of the future when it is already clawing at the walls of your sleep? You lie awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling. The constellations etched in stone seem to flicker, shifting shapes you cannot name. And for the first time, you realize the stone giant is not only a sanctuary, it is a tomb waiting to be filled. The gong sounds, calling you to rise, to meditate, to train. You stand with the others, your body obedient, but inside, the dreams remain, clinging to you like shadows. You know now that something is coming. The Force is warning you, and though the masters tell you to release, you cannot. Because when the dreams return, they do not feel like illusions, they feel like prophecy. And deep down, in the ember of your chest that still refuses to die, you know, the storm The temple always feels larger when the masters walk its halls. Their presence makes the stone breathe differently, makes the air heavier, makes your steps feel smaller. You have seen them before, passing through archways, standing at the edges of training yards, their robes flowing like waves of history. But to live under their gaze is something else entirely. When a master's shadow falls across you, it is as though the Force itself leans closer, whispering its judgment. From the first day, you are taught to revere them. The names are carved into you as surely as the code. Yoda, the Grand Master, who has lived longer than the Republic itself, who speaks in riddles that sound like poetry worn down by centuries. Mace Windu, sharp as a blade, his eyes like fire contained in crystal, his every word a test of steel. Shaak Ti, serene, flowing, as if her presence is a tide that cannot be resisted. Ki-Adi-Mundi, thoughtful, distant, his voice like wind moving through stone. They are giants cloaked in flesh, and you are told that without them the galaxy would drown in chaos. But to you, they are more than names. They are walls you cannot climb, shadows you cannot escape. Their words settle into your bones whether you want them to or not. It begins with the Council's visits. You are summoned with your clan into the towering chamber of the High Council, its seats arranged in a perfect circle, its windows gazing out over the endless expanse of Coruscant. The first time, your legs nearly buckle beneath you. The chamber hums with a power older than anything you can imagine. When Yoda speaks, his voice is soft, almost gentle, yet it fills every corner. Strong in the Force, you all are, he says, his green eyes twinkling with something that feels both kind and sharp. But strength without discipline, dangerous it becomes. His words settle into you like stone dropped in water. You nod we of the others, but inside you feel the weight of expectation tightening like a fist around your chest. The masters do not speak often, but when they do, their words carve deeper than any saber strike. You remember the first time Mace Windu looked directly at you. His gaze was not cruel, but it was unyielding. He asked a question of the group, why does the Jedi not cling? And for a moment, silence filled the chamber. Your mouth opened before you could stop it. Because attachment makes us afraid to lose, you said, repeating what had been drilled into you. Windu's eyes did not soften, but they did not harden either. He gave a single nod, then turned his gaze away. The acknowledgement was brief, but it felt like a brand. You lived off it for weeks, both proud and terrified of the weight it carried, and yet the shadows of the masters are not only carved from wisdom, they are also carved from distance. You never see them laugh, you never see them falter. They move through the temple as if the stone itself bends to make way for them. Their shadows stretch over you like vast wings, but wings that never touch. They are everything you are supposed to become, and yet they feel as unreachable as the stars buried beyond the city lights. Sometimes you glimpse moments that feel almost human. Yoda watching the youngest children play with a faint smile, as though he remembers a time when joy was allowed. Shaak Ti pausing in the gardens, her hands brushing over the blossoms with reverence. But those moments vanish quickly, replaced by the mask of serenity, the armor of detachment. You begin to wonder if the masters are still themselves at all, or if they have become extensions of the code, living statues that speak not for their own hearts, but for the will of the Order. The older younglings whisper about Anakin Skywalker, the one who walks in both light and shadow. He is not a master, not even a member of the council, but his presence lingers like a storm cloud above the temple. They say he is powerful beyond measure, that he defies the code, that he loves too deeply, too dangerously. Some admire him, calling him a hero of the Clone Wars, the chosen one who will bring balance. Others fear him, muttering that his bond with the Chancellor, with his wife in secret whispers, is a chain that will one day snap. You do not know what to believe, but when his name is spoken in the presence of the masters, you notice their eyes tighten, their voices sharpen. Even giants can cast shadows of doubt. The trials of daily life sharpen under the master's gaze. When you spar, you know that a shadow might be watching, measuring every movement. When you meditate, you imagine the weight of their eyes pressing against your thoughts. When you fail, even in small ways, the shame is doubled. For you know that somewhere in these endless halls, a master has already marked your weakness. And yet, you crave their approval. Every child does. A single nod from Shaak Ti, a single word of encouragement from Yoda, a single look of acknowledgement from Windu. These are treasures greater than anything you left behind. You hate yourself for it, for the way you chase their shadows, even as their shadows smother you. The code becomes more than words when spoken by them. When Yoda recites, "Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering," the phrase is no longer a teaching, it is a prophecy. When Windu says, "We serve the Republic, not ourselves," it is not a reminder. It is a command etched into your marrow. The shadows of the Masters do not just follow you, they live within you, shaping your thoughts, your fears, your dreams. And yet, in the quiet moments, doubt seeps in. You watch the clone troopers passing through the halls, their armor gleaming, their steps precise. You see the way they look at the Jedi with respect, even reverence. But you also hear whispers, whispers of battlefields drenched in blood, of Jedi cut down, of clones dying in the thousands. The war stretches on beyond the temple's walls, and though the Masters speak of peace, their eyes carry the weight of endless conflict. You wonder if their serenity is real, or if it is simply another mask, another shadow cast to hide the truth. The dreams return too, always the same. The temple burning, soldiers marching, sabers cutting through the dark. Sometimes the face in your dream is Anakin's, sometimes it is no one at all. When you wake, your heart races, your body trembling. You want to tell a master to ask what the Force is showing you, but you know what they will say. Release. They will tell you it is fear, nothing more. They will tell you to let go. But the ember in your chest refuses. The ember knows the shadows are growing longer, reaching further, darkening the walls of the temple. One evening you find yourself in the great hall again, the sunset painting the stone in blood-red light. You see Yoda pass slowly across the floor, his cane tapping softly. The sight should comfort you, but instead it unsettles you. For in the glow of the dying sun, his shadow stretches across the stone, long and thin, fragile and vast. You realize then that even the greatest of the Masters cast shadows that cannot be separated from them. Shadows that can hide, that can deceive, that can consume. That night, you cannot sleep. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the constellations etched in stone above your bed. The pale-eyed boy shifts beside you, restless. "Do you think the Masters dream?" he whispers. The question startles you. You have never thought of it before. Do they? From the very first day in the temple, you were told that all younglings were equal. The robes were identical, the meals identical, the beds identical, the lessons identical. The Masters repeated it often. No one is above another. The Force flows through all. And yet as weeks turned into months and months into years, you began to see the cracks in that illusion. Equality was a dream carved in stone, but reality was a current pulling you against itself. You began to see how quietly, how invisibly, the rivalries took root. It started in the training yard. At first, sparring matches felt like games, children laughing even when bruises blossomed, sabers clattering against wooden floors. But then came the moments when Masters lingered a little longer to watch one child than another, when a nod or a faint smile was given to the one who struck cleanly, while another was ignored. You felt it in your bones. Recognition was rare, precious, and worth more than food or rest. A single word of praise could carry you for weeks. A single moment of silence could crush you just as long. And so the smiles between younglings grew sharper, the laughter more forced, the competitions no longer games but battles fought in silence. The Togruta girl in your clan was the first to rise. Her connection to the Force was graceful, effortless. Stones lifted for her as though eager to obey, training remotes yielded to her will, her saber strikes fluid like water. Masters began to call her promising. You saw the way her head lifted a little higher at the word, the way she walked with steps that carried the weight of pride. You wanted to be happy for her. You told yourself you were happy, but somewhere inside something coiled tight. Each time her name was spoken, yours felt smaller. The boy from Corellia was another. His wit was quick, his reflexes quicker. During sparring drills, he grinned as if he Combat were a dance meant for him alone. Masters chuckled softly at his boldness, tolerating in him what they punished in others. He began to lead games in the dormitories, gathering others around him with easy charm. You found yourself both drawn to him and repelled. He could make the temple feel less heavy, yes, but he could also remind you that the temple loved some more than others. The pale-eyed boy beside you remained quiet, reserved. He did not shine in the yard, nor did the Force bend easily to him. He often fell behind in lessons, his hand hesitating when others shot upward with answers. You saw the way Master's eyes slid past him, the way their attention moved elsewhere, and you saw the way that silence cut him deeper than any blade. One night, he whispered, "I think I'll never be chosen." You had no answer, because you feared it might be true. The rivalries were not spoken aloud, but they were everywhere. You saw it in the way children measured each other during meditation, their eyes opening slightly to check who sat most still. You saw it in the way laughter faltered when a master walked in, replaced by silence and perfect posture. You saw it in the way hands tightened around training sabers when sparring partners were chosen, the faintest smirk at a victory, the faintest tremor at a loss. It was not war, not yet, but it was a battlefield all the same. Sometimes the rivalries turned cruel. A boy tripped another during drills, pretending it was an accident. A girl whispered that someone's parents had probably been relieved to give them away. A stone lifted high with the force was released just before another could catch it, letting it crash loudly to the floor. The masters never saw these things, or perhaps they did, and simply called them part of the process. Rivalries built strength after all. That is what the temple believed. But to you, it felt like poison. You wanted friends, companions, people to hold on to in the loneliness of the temple nights. Yet every bond you tried to form was fragile, threatened by the unspoken truth that you were all competing for the same thing, to be chosen. Every smile could be a mask, every laugh a blade hidden in cloth. You trusted, but you never fully trusted, and you hated the temple for making you doubt even the ones who slept beside you. The worst came during the lightsaber ceremony. The pilgrimage to Ilum was meant to be sacred, a rite of passage where each youngling would find the crystal that called to them. The masters told you, the ice caves whispered with the Force, that each child's destiny would be revealed in the shard of Kyber they claimed. The journey itself was hard, cold, endless snow, wind that bit through robes, ice crunching under weary feet. You huddled with your clan for warmth, each step a trial of endurance. But the true trial was not the cold. It was the silence of competition. You saw it in every child's eyes as they entered the caves. Who would succeed? Who would fail? Inside, the caves were dark, glittering with crystals that pulsed faintly in the walls. The air hummed with energy, alive and waiting. You walked alone, your breath clouding before you, your fingers brushing the icy walls. And then, in a hollow chamber, you saw it. A crystal glowing faintly blue, humming with a voice that felt like it knew your name. Your hand reached out, trembling, and when you touched it, warmth surged through you, as if the Force itself had wrapped you in an embrace. You laughed, breathless, and for a moment all the rivalries, all the loneliness, all the fear vanished. The Force had chosen you. But when you returned to the gathering point, you saw the looks. The Togruta girl already held her crystal, its green light dazzling. The boy from Corellia twirled his crystal in his palm with a cocky grin. Others held theirs too, their faces shining with pride, but some returned empty-handed, their eyes downcast, their hands shaking. The pale-eyed boy was one of them. His eyes searched the group, desperate, but his hands were empty. You saw the way the masters' faces shifted. No anger, no scorn, just quiet disappointment, which was worse. In that moment, he looked smaller than ever, as though the temple itself had decided he was unworthy. When you tried to speak to him later, he turned away, Don't, he whispered. His voice cracked like ice breaking underfoot. Don't make it worse. You wanted to tell him he was still your friend, that you didn't care about the crystal, but the words stuck in your throat. Because you did care, because you had one, and he did not. Because in the temple, that difference meant everything. The rivalries did not end there. If anything, they grew sharper. With crystals in hand, the promising younglings began constructing their first real lightsabers, their hilts glinting with power. The others watched, envious, ashamed. When the Togruta girl ignited her blade for the first time, green light flooding the training yard, the masters nodded with approval. The pale-eyed boy flinched at the sound, his fists clenched at his sides. You felt caught between pride and guilt, torn in two. At night, the rivalries whispered in your dreams. You saw your friends turn against you, their sabers striking, their faces twisted in jealousy. You woke sweating, the ember in your chest burning hotter. The temple demanded you let go of all bonds, all competition, all pride. But how could you, when every day it forced you to compete, to compare, to fight for recognition? The masters told you the order was built on peace, but you could see the truth in the eyes of the children around you. Peace was an illusion. Rivalry was the reality. One evening you stood alone in the courtyard, watching the city lights of Coruscant. The sky was choked with speeders, the horizon aflame with industry. Below, families laughed in their apartments, children ran through crowded streets, voices echoing upward. They had freedom, they had love, they had belonging. You had only rivalries and shadows. For the first time you wondered if being chosen was worth what you had lost. But then the gong rang, summoning you back to the training yard. You turned, your hand brushing the hilt of your unfinished saber. The temple was not done with you. It would never be done with you. And as you walked back into the stone giant's heart, you felt the rivalries moving with you, silent and sharp as blades. You did not yet know that soon, those rivalries would mean nothing. Soon the storm in your dreams would shatter all illusions of competition, of praise, of being chosen. But for now, the rivalries burned, and you burned with them, each ember waiting for the spark that would ignite everything. The day of the lightsaber ceremony begins long before the first light of Coruscant's sun spills over the endless towers. You wake to the sound of the gong vibrating through the walls, a deep and resonant hum that makes the air itself seem to shiver. Around you, the other younglings stir in their alcoves, their faces pale and anxious, their breaths shallow. No one speaks, not yet. You all know what this day means. It is not simply another lesson, another drill. It is the day that will carve your destiny into stone. The temple has prepared you for this moment for years. Every meditation, every exercise in discipline, every clash of wooden sabers in the training yard has led you here. The crystal is more than a weapon's heart. It is a mirror of the soul. To find your kyber is to prove yourself worthy of the Force, to show the masters that you are more than a child, that you are becoming a Jedi. For some, it will be triumph. For others, it will be the beginning of silence, the path that ends before it truly begins. You dress in silence, pulling the heavy cloak over your shoulders, the fabric rough and unyielding. The caretakers lead you and your clan to the great hall, where the masters wait. Their shadows stretch long in the early light, their faces unreadable. Yoda stands at the center, his cane tapping lightly against the stone as he surveys you all. His eyes glimmer, ancient and knowing, yet distant, as though he has already seen the outcome of this day. Strong the Force is in all of you, he says, but only truth will reveal itself. To Ilum you go. What calls, you must listen. Ilum, the name itself is a weight. You have heard the older younglings whisper of it, the sacred world of ice and crystal, where the Force itself sings through the caves. To step on Ilum's frozen surface is to walk where countless Jedi have walked before, to join a lineage older than memory. And yet, beneath the reverence, fear gnaws at you. What if the crystal does not call? What if the caves remain silent? The journey to Ilum is long, the shuttle cutting through hyperspace with a low hum that seems to echo in your chest. You sit with your clan, the silence thick and fragile. Some children close their eyes, already meditating, already reaching for the crystal that may or may not come. Others fidget, their hands twisting in their robes, their feet tapping against the deck. You sit rigid, staring at the stars streaking past the viewport, your thoughts loud enough to drown the silence. You try to hear the Force, to feel its current, but all you hear is your own heart hammering in your ears. When the shuttle descends, the viewport fills with white. Elam stretches beneath you, a world of endless ice and snow, its surface glittering under the pale light of a distant sun. The air shimmers with cold, as though the very atmosphere resists intruders. The shuttle lands with a shudder, the ramp lowering into a gust of icy wind that cuts through your robes and burns your skin. You step out into the snow, your boots sinking deep, your breath crystallizing in the air. The cold is alive, biting, unrelenting. It feels like another trial, another test. The masters lead you toward the caves, their cloaks whipping in the wind, their steps steady despite the storm. The entrance yawns before you, a jagged mouth in the ice. As you step inside, the wind dies, replaced by a silence so complete it feels sacred. The walls glisten with frost, the air heavy with power. You can feel it immediately, the hum of the Force, resonant and deep, as if the planet itself is breathing. The masters gather you in a circle, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of the crystals embedded in the walls. Shakti's voice is calm, steady. The crystal calls to each Jedi. It will test you. It will show you who you are and who you may become. Trust in the Force, and it will guide you. Her eyes sweep over you, lingering for a heartbeat before moving on. You feel exposed, seen in a way that makes your chest tighten. Then you are sent alone, deeper into the caves. The cold thickens, the silence pressing against your ears until every breath sounds like thunder. Your footsteps echo, your pulse loud in your throat. The tunnels twist and divide, their paths illuminated only by the faint glimmer of crystals embedded in the ice. Some hum faintly, others lie dormant, but none call to you, not yet. You walk for what feels like hours, your body shivering, your mind restless. Doubt creeps in. What if no crystal calls to you? What if you are meant to return empty-handed, your path ending here? The thought claws at you, a fear sharper than the cold. You remember the pale-eyed boy in your clan, how his hands were empty when others returned with crystals, how the silence of the masters weighed heavier than scorn. You do not want to be him. You cannot. And then you hear it, a hum, soft at first, then stronger, resonating not in your ears but in your chest. You freeze, your breath caught, your eyes darting along the walls. The tunnel narrows into a small chamber, and there, half buried in ice, a crystal glows faintly blue. Its light pulses like a heartbeat, its hum vibrating through your bones. You step closer, your hand trembling as you reach out. The moment your fingers touch the ice, warmth surges through you, driving out the cold. The Force swells around you, within you, wrapping you in something vast and infinite. You pull the crystal free, and for a moment, everything else disappears. The rivalries, the trials, the doubts all fade. You laugh, breathless, your chest burning with joy. The crystal feels alive in your hand, its light reflected in your eyes. For the first time you feel chosen, not by a master, not by the temple, but by the Force itself. When you return to the gathering point, you see the others arriving one by one. Some hold crystals glowing with vibrant colors, green, blue, even the rare yellow. Their faces shine with pride, their eyes wide with wonder. Others return empty-handed, their shoulders slumped, their eyes hollow. The pale-eyed boy is among them again, his hands empty, his face pale as snow. You want to comfort him, to say something, but his gaze avoids yours, fixed on the ground. You know there are no words that will heal what he feels. The masters look upon you all, their faces as unreadable as ever. They do not praise, they do not scorn, they simply nod, as if this outcome was already known. The crystal is but the beginning, Yoda says, his voice echoing in the chamber. The blade, the wielder, the path, they are one. Chosen, you are not. Choosing, you are. The journey back to Coruscant feels different. The shuttle hums as before, but now the air is heavy with unspoken truths. Those with crystals sit straighter, their hands resting protectively on their treasures. Those without sit in silence, their eyes shadowed. Rivalries sharpen further, the distance between success and failure now marked by glowing shards of kyber. You clutch your crystal tightly, both proud and guilty, knowing that its light casts shadows as well as illumination. Back in the temple, the ceremony continues. You are given time to craft your saber, to shape the hilt that will house the crystal, to bind your soul to the blade. The chamber hums with energy as younglings work, tools sparking, crystals glowing. You sit with your parts laid out before you, your hands trembling as you align the pieces. The crystal pulses faintly, guiding you. The force flows through your fingers, steadying them. And then, at last, the hilt is complete. When you ignite it for the first time, the blade bursts into life with a hiss, brilliant and blinding. Blue light floods the chamber, its hum resonating in your chest. The warmth of it fills you, and for a heartbeat, you feel whole. Around you, others ignite theirs too, the chamber glowing with blades of every hue. The masters watch silently, their eyes reflecting the light. For a moment, the temple feels alive, its stone walls bathed in the glow of 100 futures. But even in that moment of triumph, shadows linger. You glance at the pale-eyed boy, his alcove empty, his hands folded tightly in his lap. His eyes are fixed on the floor, his face pale and still. The light of the sabers dances across his skin, but he does not look up. And you know then that victory and failure are not separate. They exist side by side, one child's triumph casting another's despair. That night, as you lie in your alcove, your saber resting beside you, its crystal humming softly, you cannot sleep. The dreams return, darker now, sharper. You see the temple burning, sabers clashing in the dark. Children screaming. You see your blade ignited, its blue light cutting through smoke and shadow. You hear the march of soldiers again, their boots pounding against the stone. The triumph of the ceremony dissolves into ash. You wake with a gasp, clutching your saber as though it can protect you. The crystal hums faintly, but the sound feels less like comfort and more like warning. You stare at the ceiling, the constellations unchanging, the shadows deepening. The temple has given you a weapon, but in your dreams, it feels less like a gift and more like a curse. The temple was built to feel eternal. Its stones whispered of centuries, its spires reached as though nothing could shake them, its halls carried the breath of 1,000 generations. But as the Clone Wars spread across the galaxy, you began to feel the cracks. The masters never admitted it aloud, never let the word fear pass their lips, but you could see it in the way they moved more quickly through the halls, in the way their voices carried a sharper edge, and you, youngling though you were, could feel it in the Force. The hum that once soothed you now thrummed like a taut string, vibrating with unease. The galaxy was burning, and even behind the temple's high walls, the smoke found its way inside. At first, the war was only stories. Whispers among the older younglings, rumors drifting from the archives, tales of battles fought on distant worlds. You heard of Jedi leading armies, of fleets clashing in orbit, of clones marching in perfect unison under the banners of the Republic. Names carried like thunder through the halls: Geonosis, Ryloth, Umbara, places you had never seen, but now could never forget. Some spoke with awe, others with dread. And though you told yourself it was far away, that the temple would always protect you, a part of you began to wonder when the war would reach your doorstep. It did not take long for the war to touch you directly. The first time you saw clone troopers up close, they marched through the temple's grand hall in gleaming white armor, their boots striking the stone in perfect rhythm. The sound echoed like a drumbeat, steady, relentless. Their helmets reflected the torchlight, faceless, identical. To you, they seemed like machines, like training remotes grown into soldiers. And yet, when they paused, when a commander lifted his helmet and wiped sweat from his brow, you realized they were men, brothers, grown for war, each with the SAT-me face but carrying something different in their eyes. Some looked weary, others determined, others almost boyish in their attempt at swagger. They were human, but they had been made into tools, just like you. The masters introduced them as allies, protectors of the Republic, guardians beside the Jedi. You listened, nodding when you were told to, but the unease grew heavier in your chest. The clones trained for war. You were training for peace, they said, and yet, as more and more troopers came through the temple, you could not ignore the truth. You were being trained for war too. The lessons shifted. No longer were you asked only to meditate, to lift stones, to find balance in stillness. Now the drills grew harsher, sharper. The wooden sabers were replaced more often with training blades that left scorched welts along your skin. The sparring matches went longer, the masters barking commands with more urgency. Again, they said, as sweat dripped into your eyes and bruises bloomed across your ribs. Faster, stronger, a Jedi cannot falter. You began to study more than the code. The archives, once filled with histories and philosophies, now held battle reports and holomaps of campaigns. You sat cross-legged as masters spoke of strategies, of supply lines, of sieges. The words felt heavy, meant for soldiers, not children. You copied them down anyway, your small hand cramping as you tried to keep up. You told yourself you were preparing to serve the galaxy, but deep down, you knew. You were being prepared to fight, to kill, to die. The pale-eyed boy struggled. He had always struggled, but now the war widened the gulf between him and the others. His strikes in the yard were clumsy, his meditation fractured, his studies incomplete. The master's disappointment was sharper now, their patience thinner. You saw it in their eyes. If the war demanded strength, what place did it have for weakness? One night, as you lay in your alcove, you heard him whisper into the dark, "Maybe they don't want us to survive. Maybe they just want to see who breaks last." You did not answer, but the thought gnawed at you long after he fell silent. The Togruta girl thrived. War sharpened her. Her strikes grew faster, her presence steadier. The masters praised her openly now, their voices carrying through the yard for all to hear. You watched her with a mix of admiration and envy. She moved as though she were already a knight, her saber an extension of her will. She was everything the temple demanded, disciplined, detached, unyielding. And yet, when she passed you in the hall, her eyes carried a sadness she never spoke aloud. You wondered if even she dreamed of fire. The dreams did not stop. If anything, they grew stronger. You saw battles fought in endless waves of blaster fire, Jedi cut down in the mud of alien worlds, clones screaming as they fell. You woke sweating, gasping, your chest tight with dread. The masters told you to release, to let the dreams fade like smoke. But how could you, when every day the war drew closer? How could you, when even the temple walls seemed to echo with the thunder of conflict? One day the masters gathered you and your clan in the great hall. Their faces were solemn, their voices grave. "The Republic needs its Jedi," Mace Windu said, his tone sharp, commanding. "Each of you must be ready. The galaxy is changing. The Jedi must change with it." You looked at him, at his stern face, at the fire in his eyes, and you realized he was not speaking only of the knights or the masters. He was speaking of you. Even as children, you were no longer shielded from the war. You were part of it. That night, the pale-eyed boy broke. He stood in the dormitory, his voice shaking as he shouted, "We're not soldiers, we're children." His words echoed off the stone, raw and desperate. The caretakers came quickly, silencing him, leading him away. When he did not return, his alcove lay empty, cold. No one spoke of him again. His name was swallowed by the silence of the temple, as though he had never existed. But you remembered. You would always remember. The lessons of war did not end with drills or lectures. They seeped into every moment, every breath. The temple gardens, once a place of quiet reflection, now felt like training grounds. The whispers of the leaves drowned by the imagined roar of battle. The fountains no longer sang, they sounded like the hiss of blasters. Even the laughter of children in the courtyard seemed forced, brittle, like the brief silence before a storm. One afternoon, as you sat in meditation, the force swelled within you. Instead of calm, you saw fire. Instead of peace, you saw destruction. You saw the temple itself under siege, its spires crumbling, its halls filled with screams. You saw yourself with saber ignited, striking not against droids or enemies, but against shadows you could not name. When you gasped awake, your master was watching you. His eyes were hard, his voice firm. "Release the vision. Do not cling. The future is not yours to hold." But you could not release it. It clung to you, heavy and certain. And then came the day the clones marched again. Not through the halls this time, but across the training yards. Rows upon rows, their armor gleaming, their blasters slung across their shoulders. They moved with perfect precision, their boots pounding against the stone. You and the others watched from the edges, your hearts hammering. For the first time, you understood the truth. The Jedi may have been the generals, but the clones were the soldiers, and you were being shaped to join them. The temple was not only a sanctuary, it was a barracks. That night, lying in your alcove, you held your saber close, its crystal humming faintly. The blue light comforted you, but also haunted you. You thought of the pale-eyed boy, gone without a trace. You thought of the Togruta girl, praised for her strength but shadowed by sorrow. You thought of the clones, faceless and identical, their footsteps echoing in your dreams. And you thought of yourself, caught between pride and dread, your destiny no longer your own. The masters said the war was for peace. They said the Jedi fought to end suffering, to preserve the Republic, to bring balance to the galaxy. But in the silence of your chest, in the ember that refused to die, you wondered, what if the war was not a path to peace, but the end of it. What if the temple's lessons were not preparing you to protect life, but to destroy it? You closed your eyes and the dreams came again. Fire, marching boots, blades ignited, the temple falling. And this time, when you looked down, the saber in your hand was not blue, it was red, its hum like a scream. You woke gasping, the sound of war still echoing in your ears. The lessons of war had begun, and deep inside, you knew they would never end. The war crept into the temple like a shadow at first, quiet, insistent, easy to ignore if you looked away. But shadows have a way of swallowing light, and soon it was no longer something distant or whispered. It became part of you, part of every hour. The temple still tried to keep its face serene, its gardens tended, its fountains flowing, its halls echoing with the whispers of the code. But behind that mask of calm, you felt the tension building. Every gong, every summons, every sharp command from a master carried with it the edge of urgency. You were no longer being taught for peace. You were being sharpened for something else. You remember the day you first saw the war unmasked. It was not in a training yard, not in the archives, but in a stolen moment when you and your clan were walking back from meditation. You heard the murmur of voices in a side chamber, the faint flicker of holograms lighting up the stone walls. Curiosity pulled you closer, until you found yourselves peering through the narrow gap in the door. Inside, the council gathered around a flickering map of the galaxy. Dots of light glowed red and blue, entire star systems reduced to symbols. A report crackled from a clone commander, his voice tight with static. "Casualties heavy, General. The droids pressed us hard. We've lost half the battalion, but the city is secure." His words were calm, but his face, projected in blue light, was lined with exhaustion. And then came the images. For a moment you could not comprehend what you were seeing. Cities burning, entire districts leveled, smoke rising like fingers clawing at the sky. Bodies, clones in shattered armor, civilians in streets turned to rubble, even Jedi lying motionless in the dirt. The images flickered past quickly, clinical, meant only for the council. But for you, they seared into your memory. Carved so deep, you knew they would never leave. One of the older younglings gasped too loudly. The chamber door hissed open, and Mace Windu's eyes found you immediately. His gaze was like a blade, sharp, merciless. You froze, your breath caught in your throat. "You are not ready for this," he said, his voice flat. "Return to your quarters." His tone left no room for disobedience. You obeyed, your feet carrying you back into the hall, your chest burning with shame and fear. But you could not unsee what you had seen. The galaxy was burning, and the Jedi were not only guardians, they were soldiers in that fire. And soon you knew you would be too. After that day, innocence began to crack. Training changed. The masters no longer corrected you gently when you faltered. Their voices grew sharper, their demands heavier. Sparring matches went longer, blades clashing until your arms trembled and your breath came in ragged gasps. Bruises painted your body in purple and yellow, welts stung from training sabers. And still, they said, it was not enough. You must endure, they told you. Pain is nothing, fear is nothing, only the Force remains. The Force did not feel like serenity anymore. It felt like fire, surging and wild, filling you until you shook with its current. Sometimes, when you struck in practice, you felt the strength flow through you, lifting you higher, faster, stronger than your small body should allow. It was intoxicating and terrifying, because deep down, you knew this power was meant for war. One night, in the dormitory, the Togruta girl confessed in a whisper, "I don't dream of home anymore. I dream of battle. I see myself cutting down soldiers. I see blood." Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone with something else, something fierce. You wanted to tell her it was only a dream, only fear, but you could not, because you had the same dreams. The pale-eyed boy, what little was left of him, grew quieter, since Fishulquat. Ailing to find his crystal, since being overlooked again and again, his presence dimmed like a candle flickering against the wind. One evening, as the rest of you sparred, he sat alone at the edge of the yard, his hands folded in his lap. When the master told him to join, he rose and lifted his saber, but his strikes were slow, hesitant. The other boys struck him down easily. The master's sigh was heavy. "You lack commitment. Without it, you will not survive." The words were meant to instruct, but they broke him. That night he did not speak at all. You wondered if silence was the only way he knew to keep himself from crumbling entirely. As the war escalated, the temple filled with whispers of Jedi who did not return. You heard names spoken in hushed tones, initiates realizing their teachers were gone, masters disappearing into battlefields never to come back. The halls seemed emptier, the shadows longer. Sometimes, when you crossed the Great Hall, you caught sight of stretchers being carried into the medbays, clones, their armor scorched black, their bodies broken. And sometimes you saw Jedi lying there too, their robes stained, their faces pale. One day, a Padawan not much older than you limped through the training yard, his arm bound in a sling, a scar fresh across his cheek. The other children stared at him with wide eyes. He met your gaze briefly, and you saw in his expression something you had never seen before: hollow exhaustion. Not fear, not even pain. Just emptiness. "War is not glory," he muttered when one of the boys asked him what battle was like. "It's nothing but loss." He said no more after that. The masters still tried to speak of peace, of discipline, of the code. But even their words began to sound thinner, stretched like cloth pulled too tight. You noticed it in their faces, in their voices. They too were being consumed by the war, their serenity cracking at the edges. Yoda's riddles carried a weight of sorrow, Windu's commands cut sharper, his patience shorter. Shakti's calm was like a mask worn too often, hiding something deeper. One evening, after a long day of sparring drills, you lingered in the courtyard as the sun set, painting the temple in gold and crimson. You stared at your saber, its blue blade humming softly, and you wondered what it meant anymore. Was it truly a symbol of peace? Or was it just another weapon, another tool for war? The thought gnawed at you, and for the first time, you hated the weight of the hilt in your hand. That night, the dreams came again. You saw the temple burning, as you always did. But this time, you saw children, your friends, lying where they fell, their sabers extinguished. You saw clones marching, their blasters raised. And you saw yourself, blade in hand, standing alone in a hall filled with fire. You woke with a cry, your body trembling, your chest heaving. Across the dormitory, the Togruta girl sat upright, her eyes wide. She had dreamed too. You did not speak of it. You did not need to. The look you shared was enough. Innocence was gone. The temple might still speak of peace, but the force itself was screaming of war. The next morning, as you filed into the training yard, you heard the distant sound of ships roaring through the Coruscant sky. A formation of gunships streaked past, their engines howling, their hulls marked with the Republic's crest. The children around you stared upward, some with awe, others with dread. You felt both. For the first time, you realized those ships might one day carry you. And when they did, there would be no coming back unchanged. The masters called it preparation. You called it the end of innocence. The temple had once been a sanctuary, a place of learning and light. Now it was a forge, hammering you into a weapon you never chose to be. And as the sun dipped below the skyline that evening, casting the temple's towers into shadow, you felt the ember in your chests. T-burn hotter than ever. The war was no longer coming, it was already here. And soon, it would break more than your innocence. It would break everything. By now the war had soaked into every stone of the temple, but there was one name that seemed to carry through its halls louder than blaster fire, sharper than any command from the council. Anakin Skywalker. You had never met him, not really. He did not linger in the initiate halls. He did not kneel in the gardens with younglings. He did not speak soft words in the dormitories when nightmares came. And yet his presence seemed everywhere, a current moving beneath the temple's still surface. The older younglings whispered his name with awe. Padawans spoke it with both admiration and unease. Even the masters, whose calm rarely cracked, let something slip in their voices when they spoke of him. You first heard of him before the war, in stories told by wide-eyed initiates who had been around long enough to remember. The chosen one, they called him, prophesied to bring balance to the force. The boy who had been too old to train and yet was trained anyway. The boy whose destiny was greater than all of yours. Back then, it felt like a tale told to inspire, a fable meant to remind you that the Force could choose anyone. But now, with the war raging, the whispers carried a sharper edge. The first time you saw him was not in person, but in a flickering hollow projection that lit up the archives one night. You had slipped in after training, still aching from bruises, desperate for quiet. But the silence was broken by the murmur of Padawans gathered around a projection. The image was unmistakable. A tall figure with a mane of blonde hair, his lightsaber blazing, cutting through droids with speed that seemed impossible. At his side, another figure, his Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, her twin blades flashing like green fire. The Padawans watched, breathless, as Anakin moved like a storm given form. "The hero with no fear," one whispered reverently. "Skywalker." You stood at the edge of the group. As your chest tight, the hollow projection showed him as larger than life, unstoppable, radiant. And yet when you looked closer, you saw something in his eyes, fury, raw and unrestrained, nothing like the serenity the masters demanded of you. His strikes were not measured. They were furious, desperate, almost reckless. He fought not like a statue of stone, but like a man consumed. And for the first time you wondered, was this what the prophecy meant? Balance or destruction? The whispers grew louder after that. In the dining halls, in the sparring yards, even in the dormitories at night, his name floated between breaths. Some younglings idolized him, desperate to be like him, to wield power so absolute that even the council could not contain it. Others lowered their voices, their eyes darting nervously, and whispered of his temper, of his disobedience, of the way he defied the code. They said he loved too much, cared too fiercely, and that love was dangerous. They said he was too close to Chancellor Palpatine, closer than any Jedi should be to a politician. The stories conflicted, but all carried the same truth. Anakin Skywalker was not like the others. You began to notice the way the Master's voices shifted when his name was mentioned. Some grew cautious, their words clipped as though treading on dangerous ground. Others grew stern, their tone hardening into warning. Only Yoda spoke with something like patience, though even his words carried a shadow. Difficult to see his path is. Great hope, great danger. To you it sounded less like prophecy and more like a warning carved into the air. For the younglings, though, Anakin became a kind of forbidden idol. During training, you caught the Corellian boy attempting to mimic the wild, reckless flourishes he had seen in holoprojections of Skywalker's battles. When the Master scolded him, he grinned, undeterred. "Skywalker fee. It's like this," he said boldly. "And he wins." The Master's face darkened. "Skywalker is not your example. The code is your example." Yet even as the boy was punished, you could see admiration burning in the eyes of others. You felt it too, though you tried not to admit it. Part of you craved that kind of freedom, that defiance of the endless rules. Part of you envied the fire in his strikes, the passion in his movements. He was not serenity, he was something else. And the ember in your chest, the one that refused to die no matter how often the Masters told you to let go, flared whenever you thought of him. One evening after meditation, the Togruta girl spoke quietly as you walked together through the gardens. "Do you think he's really the chosen one?" Her voice was hushed, careful but eager. "Do you think he'll end the war? That he'll save us?" You didn't know how to answer. The word chosen carried both weight and danger. If he truly was what they said, then everything rested on his shoulders. But the dreams you carried, the fire, the march of soldiers, the temple burning, did not feel like salvation. They felt like ruin. And sometimes, when you saw his face in those dreams, his eyes glowing like suns, you feared the prophecy was not about balance, but about collapse. The war dragged on, and the whispers became harder to silence. Reports filtered into the temple. Anakin leading victories against impossible odds. Anakin saving entire worlds. Anakin destroying separatist leaders with ruthless precision. Each tale elevated him higher, painted him brighter, until he seemed untouchable. Yet beneath those stories were others, quieter, spoken only in corners. Anakin disobeying orders. Anakin lashing out at the council. Anakin consumed by attachments. Some called him dangerous. Some called him savior. Some called him both. One night, you dreamed again. The temple, aflame. Children screaming, blades cutting through smoke, and in the center of it Saint. Out Anakin Skywalker, his saber ignited, his eyes burning. He reached out a hand toward you, his voice deep, commanding, "Come with me." For a moment, you wanted to take it. For a moment, the fire in him felt like warmth. And then the warmth turned to ash, and you woke with your heart racing, your skin cold. When you told no one of the dream, it was not only because you feared punishment for clinging to visions. It was because part of you feared that the dream was true, that the chosen one was not chosen to save you, but to destroy you. The Masters continued to insist on discipline, on serenity, on detachment, but you could feel their unease too. The council tower loomed higher than ever, its spire casting long shadows across the courtyards. You knew that inside those walls, Anakin's name was spoken again and again, debated like a storm no one could control. Yet down in the initiate halls, among the children who still clung to fragments of innocence, his name was spoken like a legend. It was during one of these whispered conversations that you realized innocence was not only breaking, it was gone. A boy beside you muttered, "If Anakin can defy the code and still be the greatest, then why can't we?" His words were met with silence, then nervous laughter, but you saw the flicker in their eyes. The code was no longer untouchable. It was a wall, and Anakin Skywalker had cracked it. That night, lying in your alcove, you stared at the ceiling, the constellations etched in stone above you. The ember in your chest glowed hotter, restless. You thought of Anakin, of the prophecy, of the whispers that filled the temple like smoke. You thought of your dreams, of fire and ruin, and for the first time, you asked yourself the question you had been too afraid to voice aloud. What if the chosen one was never meant to save you? The code was supposed to be unshakable. That is what the masters told you, over and over, every morning in meditation, every evening in recitation. The code was the foundation of everything: peace, serenity, balance, harmony. A Jedi without the code was no Jedi at all, only a shadow waiting to be consumed. And for a long time you believed them. You wanted to believe them. But belief has cracks, and into those cracks doubt begins to grow. It started as whispers, faint and uncertain, like cracks in the walls of the temple. A question murmured in the dormitories when the lights dimmed. A glance exchanged in the training yard after a punishment felt too harsh. A dream too vivid to be ignored. At first, you told yourself it was just weakness, the kind the masters warned against. But as the days wore on, the whispers became louder, the cracks spread, and soon, doubt was everywhere. You remember the moment you first felt it fully. You were in meditation, sitting cross-legged with your clan in one of the smaller chambers, the smell of incense curling through the air. A knight's voice guided you. Release. Let go of all you fear to lose. There is no passion. There is serenity. There is no death. There is the Force. The words were familiar, carved into your bones by now. But as you repeated them silently, something inside you rebelled. No passion? No death? How could that be true? You remembered the pale-eyed boy's empty alcove, the way his name vanished from the temple as though he had never existed. You remembered the faces of clones carried in on stretchers, their blood staining white armor. You remembered the dreams of fire, of the temple burning. Death was real, passion was real, loss was real. To deny them was not wisdom, it was blindness. And in that moment, the first true seed of doubt took root in you. It grew quickly after that. You saw it everywhere. The master's prize. Each serenity, yet their voices sharpened when the war was discussed. They preached detachment, yet you could feel their sorrow when Jedi did not return from the front. They preached peace, yet they trained you to fight, to strike, to kill if necessary. The contradictions piled up, and no matter how hard you tried to silence them, they would not go away. One evening, in the dining hall, you heard two older younglings whispering, "If we're supposed to be at peace, why do we train with sabers every day? Why do the masters lead armies?" Their voices were hushed, fearful, but insistent. Maybe the code isn't the whole truth. Maybe it's just what they want us to believe. The words shocked you, but they also thrilled you. You weren't alone. Others felt it too. The doubt was not only yours, it was spreading. The Togruta girl confessed to you one night, her voice barely audible over the hum of the temple. "I don't think they tell us everything," she said. "I asked Master Shakti once why we can't see our families, just for a day. She said it would make us weak, that we'd be tempted to leave. But why is wanting to see them weakness? Why is love dangerous?" Her eyes glimmered in the half-dark, fierce and searching. "What if they're wrong?" You had no answer, only the ember in your chest, glowing hotter. The Corellian boy's doubts took a different shape. If the code is so perfect, why doesn't Skywalker follow it? He loves, he disobeys, and he's still the greatest Jedi there is. His grin was defiant, his voice daring anyone to argue. Maybe the Council's just afraid of him. Maybe they don't want us to see that the code isn't the only way. Some nodded quietly, others looked away, but no one dared repeat his words in front of the masters. Still, the thought hung heavy in the air, too sharp to be dismissed. Even the Force itself seemed to betray the teachings. In meditation you felt not serenity, but currents of grief, of anger, of longing. The galaxy was drenched in it, soaked with war and death. The Force did not ignore these things. It carried them, screamed with them, burned with them. How could the code demand that you let them go, when the Force itself did not? The doubts bled into your dreams. You saw masters preaching peace with sabers dripping red. You saw yourself standing in a hall of mirrors, each reflection a different version of you, some serene, some angry, some afraid. You saw Anakin again, his eyes burning, his hand reaching toward you. "They're lying to you," he whispered in the dream. "The code is chains. Break them." You woke shaking, your breath shallow, your heart pounding. You told yourself it was just a vision, just fear, but the words clung to you like ash. The temple tried to smother the doubts. Punishments grew harsher for mistakes, for questions. A girl in your clan dared to ask why the Jedi were generals in a war when the code said they were keepers of peace. The master's face hardened, his voice sharp. "Because the Republic needs us. Because without us, there is only darkness." She was made to meditate alone for days afterward, her meals taken in silence. When she returned, she no longer asked questions. Her eyes were quiet, but you wondered if her thoughts were not. And yet even punishment could not erase the seeds. The war only watered them. Every time you heard the march of clones through the halls, every time you saw hollow reports of burning cities, every time a master's face flickered with sorrow before they smoothed it into serenity, you felt the doubt grow. If the Jedi were truly keepers of peace, why did the galaxy look more broken every day? One night, you and the Togruta girl sat in the gardens under the artificial starlight. She picked at the grass between her fingers, her montrals tilted as though listening to something only she could hear. "Do you think the prophecy's true?" she asked suddenly. "Do you think Skywalker will bring balance?" You hesitated, staring at the still pool at your feet. In its reflection, you saw your face, pale and tired, your eyes shadowed by too many sleepless nights. "I don't know," you admitted. "But what if balance isn't what we think it is? What if it doesn't mean saving us?" Her hand froze on the grass. Slowly she nodded, her eyes distant. "Maybe that's what I'm afraid of. The masters told you fear was the path to the dark side, but fear was already everywhere, in every whisper, in every dream, in every shadow the war cast across the temple. To pretend otherwise was not strength, it was denial." The doubts grew heavier after the day you saw Master Windu arguing with Anakin in the Great Hall. You had been passing with your clan when the voices echoed out, sharp and unmistakable. "You are too close to the Chancellor," Windu said, his tone edged with steel. "Your judgment is clouded." Anakin's voice burned in reply. "The Council doesn't trust me. They never have. Maybe they're the ones clouded by arrogance." The doors closed quickly after that, but the words lingered in the air, impossible to erase. The masters themselves disagreed. Even they were fractured. And if the code was unshakable, how could it crack in their hands? That night, lying in your alcove, you stared at the ceiling, the constellations etched above you. You thought of the pale-eyed boy, gone without a word. You thought of the Togruta girl's whispered questions, of the Corellian boy's reckless defiance. You thought of Anakin, of the prophecy, of the way the master's shadows stretched long and uneasy across the halls. And you realized something you had never dared admit before. The seeds of doubt were not weakness, they were truth. And the truth was that the order was not unshakable. It was already cracking. You closed your eyes, the ember in your chest burning hotter than ever. The masters said doubt led to fear, and fear to anger, and anger to hate, and hate to suffering. But what they never said was that doubt also led to clarity. And in that clarity, you began to see the temple for what it was, not a sanctuary, but a cage. You fell asleep with that thought heavy in your heart. And when the dreams came, they were no longer only of fire and soldiers. They were of chains breaking, of walls crumbling, of the giant of stone finally shattering. And in the distance, through the smoke and ruin, you thought you heard a voice, not the masters, not the code, not even Anakin, a voice that whispered from the Force itself, "Choose." The council chamber was meant to inspire awe. From the moment you first glimpsed it, the wide circular hall, the high windows overlooking the endless sprawl of Coruscant, the 12 seats carved like thrones, you understood that this was the heart of the Jedi. This was where the galaxy's fate was weighed, where decisions rippled across stars, where the Force itself was said to speak through the voices of the Masters. As a youngling, you looked up at those seats as though they were constellations come alive, too bright and too far for you to reach. But now as you stood at the edge of the chamber with your clan, their eyes upon you, awe was not what you felt. It was something colder. Their gazes did not warm you, did not comfort you. They pierced, they judged, they stripped you bare. The code had always been heavy, but under the eyes of the Council, it became unbearable. You were not simply a child learning the ways of the Force. You were evidence to be weighed. You were potential to be measured. You were a tool to be tested. The chamber was quiet except for the soft hum of the city beyond the windows. Masters sat in their places, Yoda at the center, small yet vast, his ears drooping like ancient branches. Windu, rigid, his back straight, his expression sharper than a blade. Shakti, calm, her mantrals silhouetted by the pale light. Ki-Adi-Mundi, fingers steepled, his brow furrowed in thought. Others filled the circle too, each one a shadow of authority, their robes falling like the folds of history. They did not smile. They did not soften. They watched. Your clan was summoned for evaluation, one of the periodic moments when the Council assessed progress. It was not meant to be punishment. It was not meant to be trial. But the truth was obvious. It was judgment. The first of you was called forward, a boy whose saber skill had impressed the instructors. He bowed clumsily, his voice stammering as he answered questions. "What is the code?" Windu asked, his eyes narrowing. The boy recited haltingly, missing a line. Silence stretched. At last Windu spoke, his tone clipped. "Study harder. Discipline is not optional." The boy's shoulders sank as he retreated, his face pale. Another stepped forward, the Togruta girl. She moved with confidence, her answers smooth, her posture strong. When she was asked to lift the training sphere with the Force, it rose effortlessly, spinning gently in the air. Shakti inclined her head, a faint sign of approval. Yoda murmured, "Promising she is." The girl bowed, her mantrals steady, her eyes flickering with pride. You felt it burn in your chest, the sting of comparison, the invisible weight of their eyes measuring you against her. When your name was called, your body froze for a heartbeat too long. Every step forward felt like walking into a storm. You bowed low, your knees nearly trembling. The silence pressed down until you thought it might crush you. "Tell us," Ki-Adi-Mundi said, his voice low and thoughtful. "Why does the Jedi not cling to attachment?" The words were familiar, repeated 1,000 times in meditation and lessons. You knew the answer. You could recite it as easily as breathing. And yet, standing in the cold gaze of the Council, doubt clawed at you. You remembered the pale-eyed boy's empty alcove. You remembered the dreams of fire. You remembered the ache in your chest when you thought of your parents. The words caught in your throat. "Because," you began, your voice thin, "because attachment leads to fear. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering." The answer was correct. It was what they wanted. But the silence that followed was heavier than approval. Windu's gaze sharpened. Yoda's ears twitched slightly. You realized they were not only listening to your words, they were listening to your hesitation. They could feel your doubt. "Doubt, I sense," Yoda said quietly. His voice was soft, but it cut deeper than any rebuke. "Dangerous. Doubt can be. Seeds of darkness. It plants." Your chest tightened. You wanted to shout that doubt was not darkness, that it was truth, that it was impossible to release what still burned inside you. But under the cold eyes of the Council, your voice failed. You bowed again, your face burning, and retreated to the circle of your clan. The evaluations continued, but you heard little. Your thoughts echoed with Yoda's words. Seeds of darkness. Was that what you were now? Not a student, not a child, but a seed of failure already sprouting? When the session ended, the Masters dismissed you with simple nods. To them, it was routine, another measure taken, another set of notes etched into the endless ledger of the Order. To you, it was a verdict you could not escape. In the hall outside, your clan murmured in low voices. Some boasted of their performance, others whispered of mistakes. The Togruta girl walked with her head high, her crystal glowing faintly at her side. The Corellian boy grinned despite his scolding, shrugging off the weight of discipline as though it were smoke. You walked in silence, the words still echoing, seeds of darkness. That night you lay in your alcove staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come. The constellations etched in stone above you seemed harsher now, their light colder. You thought of the Masters' faces, carved from saint. 1. Their eyes sharp and distant. You thought of the way they looked at you, not with hatred, but with something worse, disappointment, and you wondered if you had already failed them. The doubts deepened after that day. Every glance from an instructor felt heavier. Every mistake in training echoed louder. You began to see the council not as guardians of wisdom, but as judges waiting for you to falter. Their shadows stretched long across your path, cold and suffocating. You tried to silence the doubts, to bury them under discipline. You trained harder, meditated longer, forced yourself to recite the code until your throat was raw. But the ember in your chest refused to die. It burned hotter with every punishment, with every whisper, with every dream of fire. And then came the rumors. Whispers that Anakin Skywalker himself had clashed with the council, that he had been denied what he believed was his right, that the council did not trust him, even as the war raised him higher than any hero before. The words spread quickly among the younglings, hushed but eager. "If even the chosen one is doubted," someone whispered, "what chance do we have?" The thought lodged in you like a splinter. If the council's eyes were cold even to him, what warmth could you ever hope for? If their trust was so fragile, so conditional, was it worth chasing at all? One evening, you passed the council chamber again. The doors were closed, but voices carried faintly through the stone. You paused, holding your breath. "The boy is dangerous," Windu's voice said, sharp and hard. "His attachments cloud him." Another voice, Kenobi's, calm but strained. "He is loyal, but I fear his heart will betray him." And then Yoda's, heavy with sorrow. "Much fear in him I sense. Dark clouds his path." You stood frozen, your chest tight. They were speaking of Skywalker, yes, but their words could just as easily have been about you. That night, the dreams returned. The temple burning, the march of soldiers, sabers ignited in the dark, and at the center of it all, the council chamber, its great windows shattered, its seats empty, its cold eyes extinguished. You woke trembling, the echo of fire still in your ears. You lay awake, staring into the dark, and realized the truth that had been growing inside you since the first seed of doubt. The council was not infallible. Their eyes were not only wise, they were blind. They judged, but they did not see. They commanded, but they did not understand. They preached peace, but they fed war. And as the ember in your chest burned hotter, you felt the first flicker of something more dangerous than doubt. Not just questioning, not just fear, but anger. Anger at the cold eyes of the council, at the shadows that weighed upon you, at the silence that smothered your voice. The gong would sound again soon, summoning you back to discipline, back to training, back to the endless cycle of obedience. But for the first time, you wondered if you wanted to obey. For the first time, you wondered what would happen if you chose not to. The days in the temple had always carried the same rhythm: gong at dawn, meditation, training, study, sparring, rest, a cycle unbroken, etched into the very stone of the giant that housed you. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the rhythm changed. The gongs still rang, the routines still held, but something unseen pressed against the air. The force itself seemed heavier, as though shadows had slipped into its current. The temple was the same, and yet it was not. The sky above Coruscant had darkened, and even the walls of stone could not keep the storm out. You first noticed it in the masters. They tried to remain what they had always been: calm, steady, unwavering. Their voices repeated the same lessons, their steps carried the same grace, their eyes carried the same watchful weight. But beneath the surface, something shifted. You saw it in the way Master Windu's patience thinned, his reprimands sharper, his gaze harder. You saw it in the way Master Shaak Ti lingered in the gardens longer, her face tilted skyward, as if searching for something she could not find. You saw it in Yoda most of all. His shoulders seemed heavier, his words slower, his riddles touched with sorrow. They still spoke of peace, but peace no longer lived in their eyes. The older Padawans carried it too. They returned from missions with fresh scars and hollow expressions, their sabers nicked and scorched from real battle. They walked differently, less like students, more like soldiers. Some bore themselves with pride, but most with quiet exhaustion. You once asked one, a boy only a few years older, what the front was like. He looked at you for a long time before answering. "Loud," he said simply. "Loud and endless." Then he walked away, his hand tightening on his saber hilt as though it were the only thing keeping him upright. The younger children noticed the change as well. In the dormitory, laughter came less often. Games in the courtyards grew shorter, replaced by quiet conversations and long silences. Even your dreams, once filled with fragments of home and fleeting moments of warmth, were now consumed by fire, soldiers, and screams. The sky in your sleep was always dark now, lit only by the glow of sabers and the flash of blaster fire. The day it became undeniable began like any other. You were sparring in the training yard, sweat stinging your eyes, your wooden sabers striking against your opponents again and again. The air was filled with the thrum of practice blades and the sharp commands of knights overseeing the session. And then, without warning, everything stopped. Heads turned upward. Even the masters faltered. The sky above the temple had gone black, not with clouds. Coruscant's sky was rarely touched by natural storms. It was the smoke of warships, great fleets cutting through the atmosphere, their engines roaring, their shadows falling across the endless towers. The Republic fleet was moving, larger than you had ever seen, blotting out the sun. For a moment, awe and fear clashed in your chest. The sight was magnificent, terrible, inescapable. The war had always been out there, distant, a story told in whispers and hollow reports. But now it hovered above you, casting the temple into shadow. A hush fell over the yard. No commands, no sparring, only silence. You could feel the force rippling through every child around you, restless, unsettled. The masters exchanged glances, brief, sharp, unspoken. Then the commands resumed, sharper than before. Continue, again, focus. The sabers clashed once more, but the rhythm was broken. Every eye still flicked upward. Every strike felt strained, every breath heavy. That night, the dormitory was restless. Children tossed in their alcoves, whispering to one another despite the caretaker's warnings. "Are the separatists here?" one asked. "Are we under attack?" Another whispered. Someone muttered, "Maybe Skywalker will save us." And someone else replied, "What if he doesn't?" The silence that followed was thicker than stone. You could not sleep. You stared at the ceiling, the constellations etched above you now seeming cruel, frozen stars that mocked the darkness outside. The dreams came quickly, sharper than ever. You saw the temple burning, as always, but now the sky above it was filled with warships, their cannons firing, their engines howling. You saw Jedi falling in the halls, their sabers extinguished. You saw clones marching through the corridors, blasters raised, and at the center of it all you saw Anakin again. His blade ignited, his face shadowed, his eyes burning. "This is the future," his voice whispered, though his lips did not move. You woke gasping, your hands clutching the blanket so tightly your knuckles ached. The masters said nothing of the fleet the next morning. They spoke instead of discipline, of serenity, of the code. But you saw the way their voices faltered, the way their eyes flicked toward the windows, where the sky still pulsed with engines. They told you to release your fear, but they could not release their own. The hypocrisy settled into you like a stone in your stomach. In the days that followed, the temple grew colder. More Padawans were sent to the front, their alcoves left empty behind them. Clones patrolled the halls more often, their armor gleaming, their presence constant. Their boots echoed against the stone like drums of war, a reminder that the temple was no longer only a sanctuary, it was a fortress preparing for siege. The rivalries among the younglings faded, replaced by something heavier. You no longer competed for praise. You clung to survival, to hope, to the faint belief that somehow this would end. But deep down, you all knew the war was not ending. It was consuming, and one day it would consume you too. One evening you found yourself in the archives, seeking silence. The holoprojectors flickered with reports of battles, losses, victories, stalemates. You wandered through the rows of data cards until you found yourself staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. Red and blue dots blinked across it, systems falling, lines shifting. The war spread like rot, creeping closer and closer. You reached out and touched the hologram, your finger brushing over a red-marked world you had never heard of. In that moment you realized how small you were, how vast the war was, how little the temple walls could protect you. When you returned to the dormitory, the pale-eyed boy's alcove remained empty. His absence had become a ghost, a reminder of failure, of what happened when you could not keep pace. You sat on your bed, staring at the saber beside you, its blue crystal humming faintly. For the first time you wondered if it was not a symbol of hope at all, but a promise of the battles you would be forced to fight. The sky outside the temple remained dark for days, fleets moving endlessly, the hum of their engines vibrating through the walls. Each night, the dreams grew more vivid. Fire, marching boots, screams, Anakin's burning eyes. You began to dread sleep, and yet it came anyway, pulling you back into visions you could not escape. One night, you dreamed of the council chamber itself, the great circle of seats, the wide windows shattered, smoke pouring in. The masters lay fallen, their sabers extinguished, their robes scorched. At the center stood Anakin, his blade ignited, his shadow stretching long across the broken floor. His eyes met yours, and in them you saw not peace, not balance, but fury and sorrow entwined. "This is what they made us," his voice echoed. "This is what you will become." You woke with a cry, your chest heaving, your body drenched in sweat. You lay awake, staring at the ceiling, your heart racing. The temple still stood. The masters still walked its halls. The code was still recited each morning. But innocence was gone. Hope was cracking. The sky had darkened, and you knew it would not brighten again. The gong sounded at dawn, summoning you to meditation. You rose with the others, your body obedient, your face blank. But inside, the ember in your chest burned hotter than ever. The doubts had become truth. The whispers had become warnings. The dreams had become prophecy. The sky was dark, and the storm was coming. The temple was quiet that night, too quiet. Normally, even in darkness, it breathed with life, the soft footsteps of caretakers making their rounds, the distant murmur of fountains in the gardens, the gentle hum of the city bleeding in through high windows. But on this night, the silence was different, heavier. It pressed against the stone like a weight, seeping into the dormitories, into your lungs, into your very bones. You could not sleep, though you lay still in your alcove, your eyes wide, staring at the same etched constellations you had traced 100 times before. Something was wrong. You felt it in the force, restless and shifting, like a storm gathering beyond the horizon. It had been building for days, perhaps weeks, but now it was undeniable. Every breath carried it, every heartbeat throbbed with it. The force was warning you, though of what you could not say. Around you, the other children shifted in uneasy sleep. Some tossed and whimpered quietly, their dreams no doubt filled with the same visions that haunted you. Others lay still, but not peaceful, their faces drawn, their brows furrowed, their hands clenched into fists, even as they slept. The Togruta girl breathed sharply in the bunk beside yours, her montrals twitching as though straining to hear some distant sound. She had whispered to you earlier that day, "The Force is screaming." You had laughed nervously at the time, desperate to dismiss it. But now, lying in the stillness, you realized she had been right. The dreams came again. You tried to resist them, but they swallowed you whole the moment your eyelids closed. The temple burning, as it always did, soldiers in white armor flooding the halls, blasters raised, masters falling, their blades extinguished, younglings crying out, their voices cut short, and always at the center, Anakin Skywalker, his saber blazing, his eyes lit with fire. Sometimes he reached for you, sometimes he turned away, sometimes his blade fell. The vision shifted with every night, but the outcome was always the same: destruction. You jolted awake with a gasp, your breath ragged, your skin slick with sweat. Across the dormitory, another boy stirred violently, muttering through clenched teeth. The force pulsed thickly around you, charged and suffocating. It was not just you, it was everyone. Even those who slept carried unease in their stillness. The caretakers moved through the dormitory quietly, their faces tense. You caught one whispering to another as they adjusted blankets. "The war, it draws closer." The words were not meant for you, but they echoed anyway, heavy and certain. Unable to lie still, you slipped quietly from your alcove and padded barefoot through the darkened halls. The stone floors were cold under your feet, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the city far below. The temple loomed larger in the night, its shadows stretching, its corridors twisting like the insides of some slumbering beast. You knew you were not supposed to wander, but the walls pressed too close. The unease too great. You needed to move, to breathe. In the courtyard, you found the Togruta girl already there, her face tilted skyward, her eyes fixed on the black sky above Coruscant. Warships still hovered, faint outlines blotting out the stars. Their lights blinked like eyes. Watching, waiting, she turned as you approached, her expression unreadable. "You feel it too," she said softly. Not as a question, but as a certainty. "Yes," you whispered. Your voice cracked under the weight of the admission. "I don't know what it is, but it's coming," she finished for you, her eyes hard. You stood together in silence, the cold night air brushing against your robes, the hum of the city below rising faintly into the heights of the temple. The Force swirled around you, restless, charged, thick with tension. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground trembling beneath your feet, the abyss yawning open below. The next morning the unease did not fade. It only grew. The gongs sounded as always, but their tones seemed hollow, echoing strangely against the stone. Meditation was restless. Even the most disciplined children struggled to remain still. Training was sharper, harsher. Masters barked commands with unusual urgency, their tempers thinner than usual. A single mistake was punished not with patience, but with sharp words, cold glares. It was as though they too felt the storm building, though they would never admit it. At meals, the whispers grew louder. Younglings leaned close, their voices hushed but fierce. I dreamed the temple was attacked. I saw clones marching through the halls. I saw him. No one needed to ask who him was. Anakin's name had become too heavy, too dangerous to speak aloud, but his shadow lingered in every dream, every whisper, every flicker of unease. The Corellian boy, always bold, slammed his bowl down on the table one morning and muttered, "If the council can't stop this, then what good are they?" The table fell silent, all eyes darting nervously to the masters across the hall. No one reported him, but the words lingered like smoke. Even the council itself seemed changed. You caught glimpses of masters hurrying through the halls, their faces drawn tight, their voices clipped. Yoda's cane tapped more heavily, his steps slower, his eyes more distant. Windu's presence carried the weight of thunder, his temper visible in every movement. You overheard fragments of arguments through closed doors, voices rising, wirt is carried just far enough to sting. The Chancellor cannot be trusted. Skywalker must be watched. The war is spiraling beyond us. The whispers of doubt you had carried for so long now seemed to echo from the highest chamber itself. That night, you dreamed again. But this time, it was not only the temple in flames. You saw the galaxy itself burning, systems falling like embers into the void, the Republic crumbling under its own weight. You saw Jedi scattered, hunted, broken. And you saw yourself, standing among the ruins, your saber ignited, your face reflected in the red glow of 1,000 fires. You woke screaming, the sound torn from your throat before you could stop it. The Togruta girl rushed to your side, her eyes wide with terror. Others stirred, their own nightmares breaking through the surface. For a moment the dormitory was filled with whispers, sobs, murmurs of fear. The caretakers tried to calm you all, but even their voices shook. The night stretched on endlessly. Sleep would not come again. You sat awake, clutching your saber to your chest, staring at the dark ceiling. The Force thrummed, restless and warning, like a storm pressing against the walls. The ember in your chest burned hotter, painful now, impossible to ignore. You understood then that this unease was not passing. It was not a dream to release or a fear to let go. It was truth. The storm was coming, closer than ever, and the temple's walls would not withstand it. When dawn came, the gongs rang as always. Children rose, robes straightened, sabers gathered. The temple moved forward in its endless rhythm, pretending nothing had changed. But you knew, you all knew, innocence was gone. Doubt was rooted deep, and now the sky itself was dark. You walked into the training yard with the others, your face calm, your steps steady. But inside, the ember in your chest blazed, screaming at you, "Warnie!" You, urging you to see what the masters refused to say aloud. The night of unease had passed, but it had left something behind, an understanding you could not release. The end was closer than anyone dared admit. The night of unease did not end with dawn. It clung to the temple like a sickness, heavy in the air, staining every breath. The gongs still rang, the lessons still began, the masters still commanded discipline. But beneath the surface, you could feel it. Something was moving. The Force itself whispered it, its current thick and turbulent, no longer the calm stream it was meant to be. You were taught that the Force bound all things in harmony. But now it thrummed like war drums, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. And then came the march. It began faintly, so faintly that at first you thought it was only a trick of your restless mind, a vibration in the stone beneath your feet, a tremor in the air. But as the hours passed, it grew stronger, a rhythm, steady, unyielding. Boots, armored boots, countless in number, striking the permacrete streets of Coruscant. The sound seeped up through the towers, through the temple's foundations, until you could feel it in your chest. A steady beat, like a heart not your own. The clones were moving. From the balconies of the temple you could see them, rows upon rows of soldiers in white armor, their formations winding like rivers of steel through the city streets. Their ships blotted out the skies, their banners of the Republic gleaming against the twilight. To the citizens below, it was a display of power, of security. To you it felt like a warning. The march was not for celebration, it was for war, and yet the unease that coiled in your gut told you it was for something more. The other younglings crowded the balconies too, their faces pale, their eyes wide. Some whispered in awe, others in fear. The Corellian boy muttered, "That's enough soldiers to take the whole planet." His words were meant to sound bold, but you heard the tremor in his voice. The Togruta girl stood silent, her gaze fixed on the endless line of troopers below. Finally she whispered, "Why do I feel like they're marching for us?" You had no answer. You only knew that you felt it too. The masters tried to steady you. They said the clones were allies, loyal to the Republic, loyal to the Jedi. They said the march was only preparation, a show of strength against the separatists. But their voices lacked conviction. Even Yoda's eyes seemed more shadowed, his words slower, as though he too felt the tremor beneath the code. In the training yards you could not concentrate. Every clash of sabers, every barked command was drowned by the phantom echo of boots. You struck and blocked and parried, but in your mind you saw the clones march, their faceless helmets, their endless numbers, their blasters raised. You wondered if your saber would ever be enough against them. You wondered if it was ever meant to be. That night, the march did not fade. It haunted your dreams. You saw the clones pouring through the temple gates, their blasters firing, their armor spattered with ash. You saw yourself standing in the great hall, your saber ignited, the blue blade swallowed by the tide of white, and at the center, always at the center, was Anakin. His cloak sweeping behind him, his blade blazing, his shadow stretching across the fallen. His voice was thunder in the storm. "This is the will of the Force." You woke gasping, your body trembling, your chest tight. Across the dormitory others stirred as well, their faces pale, their eyes haunted. You knew then that you were not the only one. The dreams were spreading. The Force was not whispering to you alone, it was screaming to all of you. The next day, as you walked through the grand hall, you passed a group of clone commanders speaking with masters. Their voices carried low, clipped, professional. "Orders are being prepared," one said. "The Chancellor insists." The words sent a chill down your spine. You did not understand them fully, but you understood enough. The Chancellor, the Republic, the war, the shadows were closing in. The council itself seemed fractured. You caught glimpses of arguments behind half-closed doors, voices rising. "Skywalker is unstable. The Chancellor's power grows unchecked. We cannot delay any longer." The words were sharp, filled with urgency and fear. It was the first time you had ever heard fear in the voices of masters. If even they were shaken, what hope was there for you? The rivalries among the younglings were gone now. No one cared who was strongest, who meditated longest, who earned the master's nods. Now there was only silence, only glances exchanged in the dark, only the shared knowledge that something was coming. The Corellian boy no longer grinned. The Togruta girl no longer asked questions. Even the youngest children sensed it. The temple was waiting, and waiting was worse than war. One evening, you found yourself alone in the archives. The galaxy map flickered before you, its stars shifting, its borders bleeding red. Entire systems fell like sparks into the void. The war was not ending. It was spreading, devouring. You reached out, your fingers brushing the projection of Coruscant. The capital glowed brightly, but even it seemed fragile, as though its light could be snuffed out at any moment. You whispered to yourself, "Is this what the prophecy meant? Balance?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. That night, the march grew louder. You could hear it even within the temple, vibrating through the stone, steady and relentless. Boom, boom, boom. Each step a countdown, each step a warning. You lay awake, your saber clutched to your chest, the ember inside you blazing into flame. The Force did not soothe you anymore. It did not bring peace. It only roared, restless and wild, filled with shadows. And then you dreamed again. The temple gates opened. Clones poured in, blasters firing, sabers clashing. You ran through the halls, children screaming around you, the air thick with smoke. You saw masters falling, their blades extinguished. You saw younglings hiding, only to be dragged into the open. And then you saw Anakin, his saber cutting down everything in his path. His eyes met yours, and for the first time there was no hesitation, no plea, no warmth, only command. Stand with me, or fall. You woke with a cry, your chest heaving, your skin cold. The dormitory was filled with whispers, with trembling voices. The Togruta girl sat upright, her eyes wide. "I dreamed it too," she whispered. "All of it." Others nodded, their faces pale. The Force had shown you all the same vision, the same march, the same shadow. By dawn, you no longer doubted. The storm was no longer coming. It was already here. The march of shadows had begun, and it would not stop until the temple itself fell. The gongs rang as always. You rose with the others, your body obedient, your face blank. But inside, you knew. The ember in your chest had become fire. The Force was screaming. And the sky above the temple was darker than it had ever been. The march had begun, and soon it would reach your door. The night came heavy with silence. Not the silence of peace, not the silence of meditation, but the silence of something waiting to break. Even the city beyond the temple seemed hushed, its towers dim, its endless roar of speeders muted beneath the weight of what was about to arrive. You lay in your alcove, the saber at your side, your eyes open, too restless for sleep. The ember in your chest had grown into a flame that refused to die. The Force pressed against your ribs like a scream trying to escape. And then, at last, you heard it, the march. The sound you had dreaded for nights returned, louder now, closer. Boots, hundreds, thousands, striking the Durasteel streets of Coruscant, climbing the steps of the temple itself. The stone trembled beneath their weight. You sat upright in your alcove, heart hammering, breath shallow. Around you the other younglings stirred. Some woke immediately, their eyes wide with terror. Others rubbed their faces sleepily, confusion quickly giving way to dread. The Togruta girl whispered what none of you wanted to say aloud. "They're here." The doors groaned. Somewhere deep within the temple, metal screamed against stone. The heavy gates that had always stood as guardians were opening. For a heartbeat, hope flared. Perhaps it was Jedi returning, reinforcements from the front, heroes come home at last. But the Force told you otherwise. The current was too dark, too heavy. This was no homecoming. It was an invasion. You gathered in the dormitory hall, your clan huddled together, some clutching their sabers, though their hands shook too violently to ignite them. Whispers cut through the silence. "What do we do?" "The Masters will protect us. It's just another drill." But you knew better. The Force did not scream in drills. The Force did not bleed like this. And then you saw him. The betrayer entered. The doors of the great hall burst open, light spilling in from the fires of the city beyond. And there he stood, Anakin Skywalker, hero of the Republic, the chosen one. His cloak whipped behind him as he strode forward, his saber hilt gleaming at his side. For a moment, relief almost took you. Here was the savior of the Clone Wars, the warrior whispered of in awe, the legend who had defied the impossible time and again. The Masters spoke of him with caution, the Padawans with admiration, the younglings with worship. He had come. He would save you. But then his blade ignited. Blue light spilled across the stone, but it was not the light of hope. It was the light of judgment, of betrayal, of death. His face was shadowed, his eyes darker than you remembered from hollow projections. They burned, not with serenity, not with compassion, but with something deeper, more terrible. Fury, resolve, a storm unleashed. Behind him, the clones marched in, their boots pounding against the floor in relentless rhythm. Their blasters gleamed in the glow of his saber, their helmets faceless, their movements precise. The march of shadows had reached the temple's heart. The younger children froze. One boy whispered, "Master Skywalker," his voice trembling with both awe and fear. Anakin did not answer. His blade hummed, steady, merciless. You felt the Force crash through you in that moment, a tidal wave of terror and recognition. This was the figure from your dreams, the shadow that haunted your sleep, not savior, not protector, betrayer. The Togruta girl's voice broke the silence, sharp with disbelief. Why? For a heartbeat, you thought you saw something flicker in his eyes, something human, something broken. But then his expression hardened, and the storm consumed him. "Because this is the will of the Force," he said, his voice low, cold, final. And then he moved. The first strike came down in a flash of blue, cutting through the dark. Children screamed. Sabers ignited in desperate defense, their hums high and frantic, clashing against his like sparks against a raging fire. But his strikes were too fast, too strong, too merciless. You watched as younglings you had sparred with, laughed with, whispered with in the dark, fell before him. Their cries echoed through the hall, brief and terrible, cut short by light. The clones raised their blasters, the sound of plasma fire filling the chamber, red bolts cutting through the air. Some younglings tried to deflect them, their small hands trembling, their movements clumsy with fear. A few succeeded, the bolts bouncing wildly into walls. But most failed. Screams rose, bodies fell, smoke filled the air. The temple that had always been sanctuary was now a slaughterhouse. You ignited your saber at last, the blue light trembling in your grasp. The force surged through you, not calm, not serene, but wild, desperate, alive. You moved without thought, blocking, striking, surviving. Around you, chaos reigned, children fighting, falling, fleeing. The Togruta girl stood beside you, her blade flashing, her face fierce with defiance. "We can't run," she shouted over the roar. "We fight!" But against Anakin, fighting felt like striking at a storm with a candle, his blade oved with impossible speed, every strike perfect, every motion unstoppable. You saw him cut down the Corellian boy, his grin replaced by a scream. You saw him strike through the oldest of your clan, their saber extinguished mid-parry. With every fall, your chest burned hotter, rage and grief boiling together. You wanted to scream at him. You wanted to ask him why, to demand answers, to beg for mercy. But there was no room for words, only the clash of blades, only the hiss of blaster fire, only the sound of betrayal. At last, you locked eyes with him. For a heartbeat, the galaxy froze. His saber clashed against yours, the force of it nearly breaking your arms. His face was inches from yours, his eyes burning into you. And in that instant, you saw it. Not only fury, not only hate, but pain. Endless, unbearable pain. His betrayal was not born of indifference. It was born of something deeper, darker. You saw it, and it almost broke you. Then he pushed you back, his blade sweeping wide. You stumbled, barely deflecting, your breath ragged, your chest heaving. The Togruta girl screamed beside you, her blade flashing, her defiance unbroken. "We will not fall," she cried, but her voice was drowned by the storm. The betrayer advanced, his blade cutting through the young, the innocent, the hopeful. The temple shook with fire and screams. The march of shadows had become slaughter. You realized then that the dreams had always been true. The Force had warned you again and again. You had seen this moment in your sleep, in visions you were told to release, and now it was real. The betrayer had entered, and nothing would ever be the same. The temple would not survive the night. The temple had never known such screams. Its stones, once filled with chants of meditation and the hum of training sabers, now echoed with cries of terror, the clash of blades, and the crack of blaster fire. The march of shadows had become massacre, and hope itself bled into the floor. You had thought the temple eternal, unbreakable, a sanctuary carved out of the Force itself. But in that moment, under the blazing blue of Anakin Skywalker's blade and the endless storm of clone fire, you realized it had always been fragile. It had always been an illusion, shattered now in a single night. The betrayer moved through the great hall like a storm-given flesh. His saber-cut arcs of merciless blue, each strike deliberate, each motion impossibly precise. He did not hesitate, did not falter. Once you had whispered his name in awe, the hero with no fear, the chosen one. Now you whispered it only in horror. His eyes burned with something more terrifying than rage. They burned with conviction. Children fell before him, younglings who had once sparred beside you, who had once whispered to you in the dark of the dormitory, who had once laughed in fleeting moments of innocence, all cut down in heartbeats. Some tried to fight, their sabers flashing with desperate skill, but they were too small, too untrained. Others fled, only to be struck down by blaster fire, their cries drowned by the hiss of bolts and the pounding march of clone boots. The Togruta girl fought like fire beside you, her blade whirling, her face fierce. Each strike of hers was a scream against fate, a refusal to surrender. "We can't stop," she cried over the chaos. "We can't give in." Her words fueled you, even as your arms shook, even as your lungs burned, even as despair coiled tighter around you. The clones advanced in waves, their armor gleaming under the glow of blaster bolts, their movements perfectly in sync. Hay fired without hesitation, without mercy, their faceless helmets reflecting the flames. You remembered seeing them once as protectors, allies, brothers in arms to the Jedi. Now they were executioners, their loyalty twisted into chains, their humanity buried beneath orders. One boy tried to surrender, dropping his saber, raising his hands. "Please!" he cried. A bolt struck him in the chest, cutting his plea short. His body fell lifeless, smoke rising from his robes. You turned away, bile burning your throat, your heart screaming. The slaughter made no distinction between brave and weak, fighter and child. It consumed all. You fought because you had to. Your blade deflected bolt after bolt, sparks flying, your arms trembling with the force of each impact. You struck once, twice, cutting through the chaos not with skill, but with desperation. Every movement was survival, nothing more. The force surged through you wildly, untamed, not the calm current the masters had always demanded. It screamed in your ears, roared in your chest, guided you only enough to keep you breathing. And still, it was not enough. The Corellian boy, reckless even in terror, charged at Anakin himself, his saber raised high. "Monster!" he shouted, his voice breaking. For a heartbeat you dared to believe, dared to hope that maybe courage would matter, that maybe fire could fight fire. But Anakin's blade met his with a single effortless strike. The boy's saber shattered from his grip, and in the same breath, blue light carved through him. His body crumpled to the floor, lifeless. Hope died with him. The Togruta girl screamed, a raw sound of fury and grief. She hurled herself forward, her strikes wild, her montrals trembling with the weight of the Force. For a moment she even forced him back, her blade clashing against his in sparks of desperate fire. But Anakin's eyes did not soften, did not falter. His next strike was merciless. She fell, her saber extinguished, her body still. The ember in your chest flared into agony. The girl who had whispered her doubts, who had dreamed as you had, who had stood beside you through every trial, gone in a single stroke. The Force howled. You could not hear the screams anymore, could not hear the blasters, could not even hear your own breath. Only the howl of the Force, raging, tearing, bleeding. Your vision blurred, your body moved on instinct, your saber flashing in frantic arcs. You struck down a clone, his helmet splitting as he fell. Another, then another. Rage filled you, raw and unrestrained, burning hotter than the ember had ever dared. You did not fight for peace. You did not fight for the code. You fought for survival. But even rage was not enough. The betrayer turned toward you, his blade dripping light. His shadow fell across you, immense and suffocating. You raised your saber, your arms shaking, your heart hammering. For a moment, your blades met, blue against blue, the clash screaming with sparks. You stared into his eyes and saw not only fury, not only conviction, but something worse, emptiness, a void where hope should have been. Your strength faltered. He pressed harder, his blade grinding against yours, forcing you back step by step. Your feet slipped on blood-slick stone, your lungs burned, your body screamed. And then, just as his blade arced toward you, blaster fire exploded across the hall. A stray squad of clones had turned their fire not on you, but on others fleeing behind. Anakin turned to cut them down, his strikes flashing, his fury redirected. In that moment, you stumbled backward, gasping, alive only by accident. You fled into the shadows, your saber clutched tight, your chest heaving. The temple burned. The screams grew fainter as one by one they were silenced. The air was thick with smoke, with ash, with the stench of fire and death. Statues of ancient Jedi cracked and crumbled, their stone faces shattered, their legacy erased. The archives glowed with flame, knowledge of 1,000 generations turning to cinders. The great hall, once filled with light, was now a tomb. You hid in the shadows, your body pressed against the stone, your tears burning down your cheeks. You heard the last cries of children you had known, their voices silenced by blaster fire, by sabers, by betrayal. You wanted to scream, but the sound caught in your throat. You wanted to fight, but your body could not move. All you could do was survive, and even that felt like failure. When the silence finally came, it was worse than the screams. The clones marched still, their boots echoing, their movements precise. Anakin strode among them, his saber extinguished now, his cloak dragging through the blood. His face was unreadable, shadowed, broken and unbreakable all at once. You pressed your hand to your chest, to the ember that had burned there for so long, but it did not feel like an ember anymore. It felt like ash. Hope had been slaughtered, cut down beside your friends, drowned in fire and blood. The temple had fallen, and with it, the innocence of everything you had believed. The betrayer walked on, his march unending. The clones followed, their boots pounding like a funeral drum, and you remained in the shadows, alive, but not whole, never whole again. The temple was no longer a sanctuary. It was a grave, and you knew, with a clarity that carved deeper than any blade, the slaughter was not just of children, not just of Jedi, not just of hope. It was of the future itself. The temple had always breathed. Even in the dead of night, its stones carried sound, the hum of fountains, the murmur of caretakers, the soft shuffle of younglings' bare feet on stone floors. There had always been life in the air, a rhythm that reminded you the order endured, that you were never truly alone. But now, silence. The halls of the Jedi Temple lay still, broken only by the faint hiss of smoke curling from scorched walls. The fountains were cracked, their waters trickling weakly, running red in places where blood had mingled with stone. Statues that had stood for centuries, guardians of memory, carved in honor of masters long dead, lay shattered across the floor. Their broken faces stared sightlessly into the void. You pressed yourself into a shadowed alcove, your body trembling, your chest aching with every breath. The silence was worse than the screams had been. At least screams meant there were still voices left. Now there was only the echo of absence. You tried to remember the temple as it had been only days ago. Laughter in the courtyards, the chanting of the code in the morning, the sharp crack of sabers colliding in the training yard, the smell of incense in meditation chambers, the sound of Yoda's cane tapping rhythmically across polished stone. But those memories slipped through your fingers like smoke. The temple before felt like another world, a dream you had once clung to. What surrounded you now was a tomb. You moved quietly, every step measured, every breath shallow. The dormitories where you had once slept in uneasy comfort were now ruins, beds overturned, blankets scorched, alcoves empty. You stepped carefully to avoid the still forms scattered across the floor, children you had once called brothers and sisters, their sabers extinguished beside them. You wanted to close their eyes, to give them peace, but you dared not stop. Even in silence, Dan Jur still lingered. The march of clones had faded deeper into the temple, but you could still hear them at times, the faint pounding of boots echoing through distant corridors. The sound turned your stomach to stone, your legs ready to collapse. You hid each time it came, pressing against walls, squeezing into niches, praying the faceless masks would pass you by. Somehow, miraculously, they did. You told yourself you were surviving, but it did not feel like survival. It felt like hiding from death only to walk deeper into it. Each hall you passed carried ghosts, the pale-eyed boy whose alcove had always been empty, the Togruta girl who had whispered her doubts and fought beside you until the end, the Corellian boy whose grin had been carved away by a single stroke of betrayal. Their voices lingered in the silence, their absence louder than sound. At one point you stumbled into the archives, or what was left of them. Fires had burned there, though the flames were gone now, replaced by the acrid stench of smoke. Holobooks lay scattered across the floor, their glowing text shattered into fragments, centuries of wisdom erased in moments. The galaxy map still flickered faintly, its stars blinking weakly before fading into static. You stared at it, your chest tight. Knowledge meant to endure for generations. Gone, just like the Order itself. You dropped to your knees, clutching your saber against your chest, and for the first time, you wept openly. The tears came hot and unrelenting, burning trails down your face. You had been told your whole life to release emotion, to let go, to embrace serenity. But serenity was gone. Peace was gone. The code was ash, meaningless against the silence in the halls. You pressed your forehead to the cold stone, your sobs echoing faintly in the ruins of the archives. You whispered names one by one of those who had fallen, though you knew no one would hear them. Maybe the Force would carry them, maybe not. But you could not let them vanish into silence without a word. The betrayer's shadow still haunted you. You could feel it in the Force, vast and heavy, a darkness that had spread through the temple like wildfire. Anakin Skywalker, hero, chosen one, Savior. His blade had burned brighter than any, and now it had extinguished all light. You remembered his eyes when they locked with yours. Burning, but empty. Conviction carved into sorrow. You hated him. You feared him. And somewhere, deep in a place you tried to bury, you pitied him, because if he was the chosen one, and this was what destiny demanded of him, then what hope had there ever been for you? Hours passed. You wandered deeper into the temple, your body numb, your senses dulled. Once you found a group of clones, their boots echoing, their blasters raised. You ducked behind a broken pillar, clutching your breath, praying they would not see. One turned, his helmet tilting, but then another barked an order, and they moved on. You remained there long after they were gone, your body frozen, your chest aching. At last, you reached the council chamber. The great circle of seats, once filled with wisdom, stood empty now. The wide windows overlooked the city, but smoke dimmed the glow of Coruscant's endless towers. The silence here was heavier than anywhere else. The masters who had sat in those seats, who had judged you, who had weighed your worth with cold eyes, they were gone. Whether slain or scattered, you did not know. Their absence filled the room like a scream too loud to hear. You stood at the center of the chamber, your saber heavy in your hand, and looked out at the city. A republic still lived, still gleamed below, but it was a lie. You knew it now. The republic had fallen with the temple. The galaxy had fallen with the children. What remained was shadow. Your legs gave out, and you sank to the floor. For the first time, the ember in your chest felt cold. For so long it had burned against the code, against silence, against loss. It had been your defiance, your hope, but now even it felt extinguished, smothered by the silence of the halls. You do not know how long you sat there. Hours, perhaps only minutes. Time itself seemed fractured, meaningless in the ruins of everything you had known. At last you rose again. The silence did not change. The halls were still tombs, the air still thick with smoke and death. But you were breathing. Somehow, impossibly, you were still alive. You gripped your saber tighter, not as a weapon, not as a symbol of the order. It was neither anymore. You gripped it because it was the last piece of you left, the last fragment of a life already lost. The silence in the halls stretched on, and as you walked alone through the ruins, you realized it would stretch forever. Because even if you lived, even if you walked out of these walls into a galaxy already consumed by shadow, a part of you would always remain here, trapped in silence, among the echoes of laughter turned to screams, among the ashes of hope, among the ghosts of the children who had never been given a chance to grow. The temple was dead, and so, in some way, were you. The temple no longer lived. It smoldered. From the high towers that once gleamed like beacons of serenity, black smoke rose into the night sky of Coruscant, mingling with the endless traffic lanes and neon glow of the city. The sound of fountains had gone silent, replaced by the hiss of flames consuming ancient wood and parchment. The air itself tasted of ash. You stood in the ruins of a place that had promised eternity, a place that had sworn to protect you. All that remained were embers. The order was gone. You had known it from the moment the betrayer's blade cut through the first of your clan. You had known it from the moment the clones turned their blasters not on droids, but on children. You had known it from the silence that followed, when the cries of younglings and the voices of masters were smothered beneath the roar of fire. Still, seeing it now, the shattered halls, the toppled statues, the broken sabers scattered across stone floors, you felt the truth strike again and again, as if the galaxy wanted to make sure you understood. The Jedi were finished. You moved carefully through the wreckage, your saber hilt heavy in your hand, though you did not ignite it. The corridors you had once run through freely now felt like tombs. Charred robes lay across the stones. Hollow books were reduced to blackened fragments. Even the meditation gardens where you had once knelt under the gentle hum of fountains were scarred, their trees burned, their blossoms trampled under the march of armored boots. Everywhere you turned, you saw ghosts. The pale-eyed boy, whose alcove had been empty long before this night, stared at you from shadows. The Togruta girl, who had whispered of love and doubt, lingered in the edges of your vision, her voice echoing in your ears. The Corellian boy, who had once laughed too loudly, seemed to grin at you from scorched walls. You blinked, and they were gone. Only silence remained. You had not spoken since the slaughter. Words felt too fragile, too small to contain the enormity of what had happened. The Force itself was quiet now, no longer screaming warnings but whispering only sorrow, a low mourning that filled your bones. It felt broken, wounded, bleeding with the order that had served it for millennia. You stumbled into the great hall, the place where once younglings sparred and laughed, where masters watched with faint approval, was now a ruin of bodies and smoke. Sabers lay extinguished beside their owners, small hands outstretched as if still reaching for life. The sight wrenched your chest until you thought it might tear in two. You dropped to your knees, choking on sobs you could no longer contain. You had survived, but survival felt like betrayal. Why you and not them? What made you different? The questions clawed at you, raw and unrelenting, and there were no answers. The council chamber, too, was empty. Its circle of seats stood silent, its wide windows cracked by the concussions of battle. The city beyond still burned faintly, its towers glowing, indifferent to the fall of the order that had protected it for 1,000 years. You walked to the center of the chamber, where once you had stood trembling under the cold eyes of the masters. Now no eyes watched you. No voices weighed your worth. The council was ash, just like the children, just like the order, and yet you still lived. You hated it. You hated the breath in your lungs, the pulse in your veins, the weight of your body refusing to collapse. You wanted to lie down and join the silence. You wanted to release as the code had always demanded, but the ember in your chest, though choked with ash, still burned, weakly, faintly, stubbornly. It whispered, "Live." Why? For what? The galaxy had turned against you, the clones you once trusted, the hero you once revered, the counsel you once obeyed, all gone, all twisted into shadow. The temple itself had fallen. What future could there be? You wandered through the ruins until you found yourself at the archives again. Smoke still curled from blackened shelves, data scrolls melted, holocrons shattered, knowledge of centuries lost in hours. You sifted through the wreckage, your fingers blackened with ash, searching for something, anything, that had survived. At last you found a single data card, its surface scorched but intact. When you activated it, the faint glow of text appeared, an ancient entry of the code. There is no death, there is the Force. You laughed bitterly, the sound breaking in your throat. No death? Death lay everywhere. No serenity? The air itself screamed with sorrow. The code was a lie. Or perhaps it had always been a dream too fragile for the galaxy to hold. You closed the data card and let it fall back into the ash. The clones had left, their march echoing into the distance. Perhaps they believed the slaughter complete. Perhaps they did not care if 1 or 2 children remained. Perhaps they knew the galaxy itself would finish what they started. You stood alone in the temple, the last ember in a pyre that had once been a beacon. As you walked back through the great hall, you stumbled upon a broken saber. Its hilt was scorched, its crystal cracked, its blade extinguished forever. You recognized it, the Togruta girls. You picked it up, cradling it in your hands. Tears blurred your vision as you whispered her name, though no one heard. You pressed the hilt to your forehead, holding it until the metal bit into your skin. This, you realized, was all that remained of her, of all of them. Ashes and silence. The temple doors stood open now, their great frames blackened by fire. Beyond them, the city stretched endlessly, alive with light and noise. Traffic sped by, people moved, life went on. To them, perhaps, nothing had changed. The Republic still stood, the Chancellor still ruled. But you knew the truth. The Republic had died with the Jedi, and the Chancellor was no savior. He was the shadow behind it all. You stepped to the threshold and looked back one final time. The temple loomed behind you, not as a sanctuary but as a grave. Its spires were broken, its halls filled with silence, its memory stained with blood. You would carry it with you forever, but you could not stay. The ashes of the Order would consume you if you did. You turned toward the city. The air was thick with smog, the sky choked with warships, the glow of neon lights masking the darkness underneath. Somewhere out there, the galaxy still lived. Somewhere out there, others might have survived. Or perhaps you were alone. It did not matter. You walked into the night, your saber heavy in your hand, the Togruta girl's broken hilt tucked against your chest. The silence of the temple followed you, a ghost that would never release you. The Jedi Order was gone. Burned, betrayed, shattered into ash, and you, child, survivor, orphan of the Force, were its last echo. The city never stopped, even as the temple smoldered, even as the ashes of 1,000 younglings mingled with the stone. Coruscant roared and shone as if nothing had happened. From the balcony of a high tower, you watched the endless traffic lanes glitter like veins of fire, streams of speeders threading through the night. Billboards blazed with colors, lights flickered across towers, and voices carried upward in an endless chorus of laughter, arguments, and commerce. The galaxy had already moved on. No one wept for the temple. No one paused to honor the fallen. The screams that had torn through the great halls, the clash of blades, the cries of children, none of it reached the city below. To the people, life continued. To the galaxy, the Jedi were nothing but whispers, their fate sealed, their memory discarded. You pressed your forehead against the railing, the metal cold against your skin, and realized with a crushing weight, you and the others had not only died in silence, you had died forgotten. You thought of the younglings who had shared your days, the Togruta girl with her fierce defiance, the Corellian boy whose grin had carried you through long nights, the pale-eyed boy who had vanished into the void before the slaughter even began. Their voices had once filled the dormitories, their laughter had once carried through the gardens. Now the halls were empty, their names erased. No hollow report would speak of them, no archive would preserve them. They were gone, not only in body, but in memory. You staggered through the city's lower levels, lost among crowds that did not see you. To them, you were only another child in threadbare robes, another face among millions. No one recognized you as a Jedi. No one knew that your hands had held a saber, that your eyes had seen fire consume the Order. They hurried past you, shouting, bargaining, laughing, their lives untouched by the silence you carried. The galaxy did not mourn the Jedi. The galaxy had wanted them gone. In the shadows of an alley, you collapsed against a wall, clutching your saber against your chest. The ember inside you, the one that had burned for so long, flickered weakly. It had endured through trials, rivalries, betrayals, slaughter. But here, in the indifference of the galaxy, it felt smaller than ever, not extinguished, not yet, but fragile. You closed your eyes, and the forgotten voices returned. They came in whispers, carried by the Force, the laughter of children long gone, the stern corrections of masters whose bodies now lay cold, the quiet mutters of caretakers who had once tucked you in, their footsteps silenced forever. Each voice brushed against you like wind, faint, fleeting, already fading. You reached for them desperately, but they slipped through your fingers. The Force had always been alive, always humming with the voices of those who came before. Now it wept, and in its sorrow, the voices of the young were drowned out. You tried to remember them, one by one. The Togruta girl's smile when she whispered her doubts. The Corellian boy's boldness in the training yard. The pale-eyed boy's quiet despair. You repeated their names in your mind like a litany, refusing to let them vanish. But even as you spoke them silently, you felt the edges blur, the details slip. Memory was fragile, and you were only one voice. What happened when you forgot? Who would remember then? The masters had always taught that the Force remembered all things, that nothing was ever truly lost. But could even the Force hold the voices of the children who had been silenced in a single night? Or would they too be forgotten, buried beneath the weight of war and empire? The thought chilled you more than death itself. In the days that followed, you drifted through the Undercity, unseen and unnoticed. You heard whispers of change. The Republic was no more, replaced by an empire. The Senate had cheered as the Chancellor declared himself emperor. His words met with thunderous applause. The Jedi were named traitors, conspirators who had tried to overthrow the government. The galaxy believed it. The people cheered. And you realized with a hollow ache that not only had the younglings died, they had been condemned. Their voices had been twisted into lies before they could even fade. You wandered back toward the temple once, keeping to the shadows. Its spires still rose above the city, scarred and blackened. Clones guarded its gates now, their blasters ready, their helmets faceless. The temple was no longer yours. It was theirs. An outpost of the Empire. A monument not to peace but to power. You stood in the crowd below, your hood drawn low, and watched as citizens passed without a glance. No one cared. No one asked what had happened to the children inside. That night the forgotten voices screamed in your dreams. You saw the Togruta girl again, her saber flashing, her eyes blazing with defiance before they went dark. You saw the Corellian boy fall with a cry, his grin extinguished forever. You saw the pale-eyed boy fading into shadow, his despair heavier than any blade. They surrounded you, calling your name, begging not to be lost. You woke gasping, your chest tight, your body trembling. Their voices lingered, faint and fading, and you realized they were not only in your mind, they were in the Force itself, crying out, refusing to be erased. You rose to your feet, your saber heavy in your hand. You could not save them. You could not undo what had been done, but you could remember. You could carry their voices, even if the galaxy did not. You walked through the city, whispering their name, as under your breath like a prayer. Each name was a promise. Each memory was defiance. The Empire could twist the truth, could paint the Jedi as traitors, could bury the temple in silence. But as long as you remembered, the voices would not be gone. The ember in your chest flared faintly, weak but alive. It was not hope. Not yet. Hope had died with the Order, but it was something else. Defiance, survival, memory. The galaxy could forget. You would not. The halls of the temple were silent. The galaxy moved on. The Order was ash, but the voices of the younglings, the forgotten children, the lost future, they still whispered in the Force, waiting for someone to hear. And you, the last survivor, the last echo of their song, swore that you would not let them fade. Even if the galaxy forgot, even if the Empire erased, even if the stars themselves dimmed, you would remember. Because to remember was the only way to keep them alive. And in that vow, fragile as it was, the ember in your chest glowed brighter. Not hope, not yet, but a spark.